Messages from the Senate.
Message from the Senate, Mr. Speaker. This is the Murphy M motion. Mr. Speaker, I hereby announce the passage by the Senate of the following House file herewith returned as amended by the Senate, in which amendment to concurrence of the House is respectfully requested. House File 819, an act relating to Public Facilities Authority. Murphy M moves that the House concur in the Senate amendments to House File 819 and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Senate.
Representative Murphy, to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do move to concur. The bill is basically the same bill that left the House of Representatives except for a correction that the agency requested to be made. The Senate put it on, and it was a housekeeping bill, if you remember. 819 is a housekeeping bill that allows the Public Facilities Authority to expand who they can offer grants to under the Legacy Clean Water Fund. And this will help our cities and towns more if more cities and towns can apply for those grants.
Any discussion to the motion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion to concur, say aye. All opposed, no. Motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended by the Senate.
Third reading, House File 819, as amended by the Senate.
Third reading. Any further discussion of the bill? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Is anybody gone? The clerk will close the roll. There being 126 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed as amended by the Senate, and its title agreed to.
Message from the Senate. This is the Atkins motion. Mr. Speaker, I hereby announce the passage of the Senate by the Senate of the following House file herewith returned as amended by the Senate, in which amendment to concurrence of the House is respectfully requested. House File 1243, an act relating to commerce. Atkins moves that the House concur in the Senate amendments to House File 1243 and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Senate.
Representative Atkins.
Good morning or good afternoon, Mr. Speaker and members. Happy Saturday. This is the Securities bill. The Senate did not make any substantive changes. In fact, in looking at it, the only real change that they made was to put on an amendment that corrected a drafting error that was realized after the bill had already passed the House floor. So that's all that the Senate did with this. Representative Albright in particular, I'd call your attention to it. This is one, it passed the Senate, I think 50-0 or 54-0. It was a little more of a challenge in the House. And I just wanted to make sure that there were a number of folks that voted against it because it does comply with Dodd-Frank and other federal conformity measures. We didn't make any changes coming back from the Senate to those, but I wanted to alert you in case you wanted to stay consistent with your previous vote. With that, though, I'd appreciate members' support for the bill.
Any discussion of the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion to concur, say aye. All opposed, no. Motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended by Senate.
Third reading, House File 1243, as amended by the Senate.
Third reading. Any further discussion to the bill? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 81 ayes and 44 nays, the bill is repassed as amended by the Senate and its title agreed to.
Message from the Senate. This is the Benson J motion. Mr. Speaker, I hereby announce the passage by the Senate of the following House file herewith returned as amended by the Senate, in which amendment the concurrence of the House is respectfully requested. House File 975, an act relating to human services. Benson J moves that the House concur in the Senate amendments to House File 975 and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Senate.
Representative Benson, to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do move that the House concur to the Senate amendments to House File 975. Mr. Speaker, this is the DHS Operations Policy Bill that streamlines appeals process, creates the Cultural Ethnic Leadership Council to advise the Commissioner about ways to improve health disparities, clarifies the Commissioner's ability to audit programs, and repeals some obsolete language that was identified by the Steering Committee on Performance and Outcome Reforms. Now, the Senate, Mr. Speaker, did add some amendments, all of them very positive. One of them was it clarified languages in the development of the Cultural Ethnic Leadership Council, clarifies that public members of the Council will not receive compensation, but legislators who are not prohibited from receiving per diem reimbursement for their participation. Added an expiration date for the Council, that they have to complete their recommendations for the Consular and set to expire in March 2015. And then finally, Mr. Speaker, required that the Council to improve outcome measures in its reports to the Commissioner and Legislature. And the Department indicates they welcome these changes and would also recommend the House concur to the Senate language. So, Mr. Speaker.
Any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. All opposed, no. Motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended by Senate.
Third reading, House File 975, as amended by the Senate.
Third reading. Any further discussion? Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the author yield?
He will yield. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Benson, the Cultural and Ethnic Communities Leadership Council, this appears to be another council among the many that is being brought forward here by the majority this year. Can you tell us more, I'm just catching up with the language again, what the council does and what is the real driving force, need, mandate, whatever you might call it, the reason for the development of the council?
Representative Benson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Drazkowski, the council its objective is to allow groups who many times are not well served in the health care area to have an opportunity to sit directly down with the Commissioner to discuss together their concerns. And as I mentioned, the Senate added clarifying language that said that nobody will get any compensation. So it's simply an opportunity for groups that have not been well represented or have had their concerns heard clearly and directly by the Commissioner to have an opportunity to do so. So in a sense, I guess it's a new commission, but it's one that doesn't cost anybody nor the Commission any money.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Benson yield again?
He will, Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Benson. You know, I do look at this and I see there are people from the counties and other organizations, other human services groups that are part of this. Have you considered, or is it considered in the fiscal costs of the bill, the costs, the local impact costs for these different organizations to come to St. Paul to have a discussion around the issues that you talked about?
Representative Benson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Drazkowski, these people do meet the officials you're describing do meet with the commissioner. All this does is allow representatives of groups that have had concerns and have felt kind of left out to have an opportunity to meet with them directly. So this is not designed to have all kinds of new meetings and bringing people in from throughout the state. It's simply that when the commissioner meets with these agencies, that the minority and other interested groups have a chance to discuss directly with the commissioner to find some solutions and solve some of their problems that have been outstanding. And I think that's really the only objective. And so I think that answers it pretty well.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Benson yield again?
He will. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Benson, so, as I look at this, is there anything prohibiting these groups from getting together with the legislators prescribed in the bill and or the commissioner on their own without this bill being enacted into law?
Representative Benson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Drazkowski, I think it would be useful if we could direct the question to Representative Moran. She has been working on this a lot in a parallel bill. So I think she is more knowledgeable than I and could give you a more full explanation.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Benson, would Representative Moran yield, Mr. Speaker?
She will. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Moran, can you tell us, is there anything precluding these organizations and their members from, I'm assuming throughout the state, from getting together either with the commissioner or the prescribed members of the legislature that are in the bill? Is there anything precluding them from doing this without us actually creating additional law and structure in law?
Representative Moran.
Mr. Speaker and members, thank you. Representative Drazkowski, this council came out of a group of community members, diverse community members, who have been meeting over several years in relationship to disparities in communities of color. So this is a recommendation that came from this group to really have an opportunity to engage with the Commissioner of Health and Human Service in a way that they can bring experiences, their expertise, their knowledge from diverse communities in partnership with the commissioners to create better outcomes as we look at disparities in the health health field. And I think we want to do this in a way that is really organized, in a way that is really allow their voices to be at the table with the commissioner as we look forward to ending and closing those great disparities that we have in communities of color.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Moran continue to yield?
Representative Moran? Yes, Representative Moran will yield. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you, Representative Moran. So, Representative Moran, this group that has been meeting for up to 7 years that kind of brought forward this idea, over that 7-year period, had they met with the commissioner or any representatives of the commissioner's office in the discussion either around this bill or around issues generally?
Representative Moran.
Thank you, Speaker. So what they have done is, this was an effort that was a partnership between community members and the Department of Human Services. And so let me just clarify, I didn't say 7 years, I said several years. And so this is the work that has been done in the community in partnership with the Department of Human Service.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the representative will continue to yield.
She will yield. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, Representative Moran, over the several years that they have been meeting and discussing these needs that are being realized through the development of this legislation, over those several years, have they have they met with the commissioner or the commissioner's representatives during that time?
Representative Moran.
Thank you, Speaker. Not to my knowledge.
Representative Driscollowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Moran. Members, we have in front of us, again, one of many different councils and commissions that have been developed by this legislature over the last several months during this session. We see here again another council that is redundant, that is not necessary, that the organizations and individuals that brought this forward, it certainly appears to me, have the ability to communicate with their legislators that are prescribed to be members of this council. I know different groups and organizations have talked to the Commissioner's office in the past and their representatives. God only knows the number of workers that we have in the Commissioner's office in this huge bureaucracy called the Department of Human Services. We are creating here another layer of redundant and unnecessary government that not only adds to the large volumes of statutes that we have, but adds to the requirements that we are putting on these government officials, creating more costs, members, that I don't even think are reflected in this bill. If these individuals who are going to be on this council do need to come here to St. Paul or wherever they're going to meet, somebody's going to pay their costs. I don't know what other members see in their local communities, but what I see is counties and other organizations, as prescribed in this bill, each of them do generally pay the costs of their members and representatives to go to be part of these different councils and commissions. And I would suspect that had we put forward a local impact note on this bill, and specifically this section, we would have found that there would have been costs incurred here by the local units of government that we don't have the information for. So I would encourage members that we consider a no vote on this bill. More redundancy, bigger government that's unnecessary for the people of Minnesota. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Leidiger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Well, I agree with Representative Driscollowski, and I think it's something that we have to be concerned with. It's the expansion of the executive branch into what historically the judicial is responsible for. So here we sit in the legislature, kind of, in my mind, building government, building more power over into the executive. But I actually want to talk about a different issue, probably is a little bit along these same lines. Representative Benson, if you'd please yield to a question, and maybe it's for you and you can pass it off, but I'm not sure.
He will yield. Representative Leidiger.
Thank you. Really, it's this balance on, who has the ultimate jurisdiction on the maltreatment cases and who's making the adjudication. Ultimately, is it the Human Services Agency, or are we talking about the district courts? What's happening in the balance of that?
Representative Benson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative, this is, part of the DHS operations policy bill, which I'm carrying for the department, and the department created this Ethnic and Cultural Leadership Council to just simply advise the Commissioner about ways that we can improve and begin to reduce some of the health disparities that we all recognize exist. So I really don't think this is an issue having to do with executive versus judicial powers in any way. This is just a kind of an ad hoc commission or group who have experienced disparities in health care delivery in the past. And I just want to add, Mr. Speaker, Representative Leidiger, myself, Representative Droskowski, and a number of others have had the great luck to be members of a majority ethnic group. And I've noticed that since I've been elected, people in the state bureaucracy seem to pay a lot more attention to my interests and wishes now than they did when I was simply an average tax-paying, law-abiding citizen. And I think for many of us, we ought to think more carefully about putting ourselves in the shoes of those who have historically had less opportunity and less entree into government services, simply because of their ethnic background. I'm not here to question Representative Moran or anyone else who she knows well, that they have had historical challenges in receiving the kinds of goods and services that government generally provides to the general public. That's simply a historical fact. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm comfortable that Representative Moran understands much better than I do what kinds of concerns and problems organizations and communities who she's speaking for as their spokesman today understands much better than I.
Representative Leidiger.
Thank you, Representative Benson. What's interesting, you know, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I know a vast amount of knowledge about this. You know, and I wasn't even thinking in that. I'm thinking more in terms of, you know, vulnerable adults or maltreatment of children. And the reason why I stand is because I have cases in Carver County that I've been following, that people have contacted me about this, and they've got a lot of questions. Who's going to adjudicate this? I'm being pulled by the DHS. I don't know, am I going to the circuit court on this? And I'm just trying to get some clarification because there's been, it looks to me like there's a lot of changes that have been put on this bill since we heard it before. So, you know, so let's take this. Let's look at this in the aggregate. I mean, are we looking at maybe a decrease or an increase in numbers in the Human Services Division that are going to be adjudicating, or are we looking at the district court? Which agency is going to be the lead on most of these cases? Are we going to have unintended consequences as a result of this legislation?
Representative Benson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Leidiger, well, the language is pretty straightforward. It simply says that this steering committee, which the Department of Health Services is setting up, is simply there so that people representing those who have had challenges getting equity in health services have an opportunity to meet directly with the commissioner. You know, I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but I know that sometimes when one is trying to deal either with a bureaucracy or maybe a private business, you have a problem maybe with your credit card or something like that, and you talk to someone and they say, well, we can't do anything about it. And I bet everybody in this room has at one point or another said, I want to go to your supervisor. I want to go to the top because you don't have the authority to make any decisions on this. And in this case, the situation is many times the commissioner is simply not aware of certain disparities which is being carried on not in a malicious way, but simply because of the rules and regulations that are interpreted in one way or another, or that the way that, you know, they've just been doing things. All this is an opportunity for people to meet with the commissioner, to visit with him or her about disparities or problems or problem solving that they can contribute, because they're there in the community. They're the ones that are experiencing the difficulties. I don't see anything wrong with that. Many of us have entree into leadership in government agencies, as I said, because we're representatives or because we're important persons in a labor union or an executive in a corporation. These agencies will listen to someone like yourself, Representative Leidiger, or I. And again, I just want to emphasize, having been born into a particular ethnic group that I have, I've had less problems with that. This is simply a historical fact, and all we're doing is allowing people to meet with the commissioner to visit about concerns they have, and maybe Representative Moran could expand on that, but that's the objective of this bill, and it's very straightforward and very simple, and it's comfort language. All of us should be happy that our state is trying to move towards a better sense of equity for all our citizens, regardless of their ethnic background, their religious background, their sexual identity, or whatever. And this is just part of it.
Representative Leidiger.
Well, once again, you know, our laws have to be written fairly. They have to include everybody, and I care. Well, not just me. I know all of us do. We care about you know, mistreatment, maltreatment, those that are vulnerable, and I think I am most concerned about, you know, the building of the executive branch, extending them far beyond the need when, you know, we have a court system that is supposed to adjudicate a lot of these things, these problems coming in, and I see what's going on in my district, and I don't want to use necessarily the word meddling, but I see confusion from a lot of people that are bringing their cases through the system by the executive branch coming in and muddying the waters on who's making the decisions on a lot of these particular cases. So we're not going to solve this right now because I don't have a great depth of knowledge in this. I'm not going to prolong this, but these are some concerns, and I think Representative Drazkowski did hit the nail on the head. We have to be careful about burgeoning government and you know, and doing social engineering that it doesn't necessarily have to be in, and having an enormous amount of cause for unintended consequences in what we're doing here. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Representative Moran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and members. So let me help bring some clarity to why creating this community council is important. Because currently, right now, there are huge disparities in communities of color, right? They're there, they're real, they are impacting real people's lives. Mothers, fathers, children. Real people's lives. And we have to do a better job in reducing these disparities. And so one of the factors is that, you know, you may believe, we may believe as a body that we have all the answers, and that people who are being impacted by a system do not have solutions to bring to the table. But these are people who have solutions based on experiences that has been impacting their lives. So it's really, really important that we bring community members, citizens of color to the table to bring solutions to how we can end health disparities. I think we have, what I'm hearing here is two visions. I hear from you that what we're doing here is growing government. You know, growing government. And what I am saying and what this group of people believe is that thus far, government has not closed the disparities that are impacting real people's lives. And that they can be a partner, they can be a solution to helping close these disparities. They're not asking for you to give them a stipend. They're not asking for funding. They are asking to bring their voices to the table with the commissioner who is making decisions about the laws that are going to impact our lives. This is important to a group of people who have been impacted. And so I just ask you guys, as you think about growing government, to think about a way that you can include people who have not traditionally been a part of that solution-making process, to give them the opportunity to be included in that process. Something that maybe you don't understand, maybe something that you don't see, maybe something in your life that you see is only about growing government. But this is about impacting health disparities that are impacting people's lives back in the community, back in the real world. And there's laws and policies and procedures that are in place that are not aligning with the needs of these communities. So I just ask for your vote.
Member from Douglas, Representative Franson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If Representative Moran would yield to a question.
He will yield. Representative Franson.
Representative Moran, I just have a few questions regarding the OLA report. And this is the February 2013 when it discussed the state-operated human services. And I just want to see if your bill addresses the needs of the OLA report. Some key facts and findings on this report was that the Minnesota Department of Human Services operates more than 130 residential facilities for individuals with mental illness, developmental disabilities, and chemical dependencies. And then it goes on to say that the mission of DHS's state-run services is not clear in state law, that the governance structure for state-run services has been confusing, and its oversight of these services has, at times, been insufficient, provided little useful information to the legislature and public for evaluating the performance of its state-run services. And a big concern of mine, because this is an issue that I got to work on this summer in my district regarding a state-run hospital that I have, a mental hospital. Behavioral health patients have stayed in state-run hospitals longer than necessary, partly due to inadequate placement options following discharge. And this is the big concern that I have in my district, is inappropriate restraint and seclusion of patients that contributed to the closure of one state-run facility and serious sanctions against another. State-run facilities experiencing problems with workplace safety, reports of physical assaults, and then that DHS has struggled to address various challenges at the Minnesota Securities Hospital, and then also individuals that enter state-run facilities following civil commitment by courts, but the state law has overlapping provisions for some types of commitments and does not ensure periodic court review of all commitments. So if you could just explain to the body and to the public how your bill will make the OLA, address the concerns of the OLA report and make the services better. Thank you.
Representative Moran.
Thank you, Speaker. Representative Franson. I'm really not clear about what bill are you speaking about. Are you speaking about the bill that's in front of you, that is Representative Benson's bill?
Representative Franson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, Representative Moran, House File 975.
She will yield. Representative Moran.
Representative Francis, this is Representative John Benson's bill.
Representative Franson.
Well, then, Mr. Speaker, thank you. Representative Moran, I do apologize then. If I could, if Representative Benson would mind yielding.
He will yield. Representative Franson.
Representative Benson, I don't think that I need to repeat my question. If I do, just let me know. But if you could address the concerns regarding the OLA report, how in your bill does your bill address those concerns and make things better for everyone involved here?
Representative Benson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Franson. My bill is a pretty simple one. All we're doing here is allowing people to sit down with the commissioner to talk with him or her about concerns they have as far as programs that the agency administers, in which folks have discovered or have experienced, health disparities, and simply a way to sit down and visit with the commissioner about ways that they believe the commissioner might find to resolve some of these problems and, move the operations of the Department of Health Services towards better services. In this case, for groups that have not been as well served or have not had access. It's not requiring the department to do anything other than to sit down and visit with people. And my view of government is the closer you can get administrators and government officials to have an opportunity or grant an opportunity for citizens to visit with them, that's all for the better. It isn't. That's just a view I have, whether it's on this particular department or any other. And a good government and good government officials who are doing their duty as servants of the people are and should be open to meet with citizens. After all, these citizens, like everybody else, are paying taxes. And since we believe in equality now in America, then everybody should have equal access. And many times the problem isn't always that a department is running purposely to disparage one group or to deny a certain group the services that the law says they need, but sometimes it's just not having enough knowledge about the situations that certain groups, Representative Franson and I, have never been members of. And I really think we ought to defer to the people who have actually had these life experiences, and rather than second guessing whether they're simply a bunch of criers and complainers and hangers on, but people who can actually contribute and help move the bureaucracy in a better way, and to expend more carefully the resources the hardworking taxpayers of this state send to these agencies of the government. And that's really all this bill is. It has nothing to do with litigation or any of those kinds of things. It's simply a group being able to sit down and visit with the commissioner and to speak to him or her directly about problems they've run into as far as the services of the Department of Health Services provides. And I think Representative Franson, you and I would agree that we want to make sure that these departments, when we send them tax money, that they are providing the best possible services at the lowest possible price, and that everybody in our society gets equal access. That's all this bill is. Nothing more. It's not litigation. Nothing. It's simply giving people an opportunity to speak with the decision makers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Franson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I think we can all agree that we've got great government officials working for us, and that government here, we're supposed to be for the people, by the people, and of the people. So I'm glad that Representative Benson and I can agree on that. But my concern here, members, is regarding that OLA 2013 report in February. Your bill, House File 975, comes to us in light of the high-profile federal and state audits into DHS use of Medicaid dollars. And the OLA report that DHS has failed to adequately manage programs for people with mental illness, chemical dependency, mental or developmental disabilities, and other departmental problems with transparency. So could you just reassure the body that your bill does or does not address the issues of the OLA report?
He will yield. Representative Benson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Franzen, I would agree with you. We ought to be moving on that, and I hope the Department of Health Services will. I'm sorry that this bill is more circumscribed than that. It does not go into those areas. This is simply... but I would love to work with you on a bill having to do with those concerns, because I think you ought to support this bill because it's similar to what you're suggesting we ought to be doing in a more general way.
Representative Franzen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Benson, thank you for your answer. So basically, the OLA report has not been addressed, members. This is findings, key facts and findings that the legislature needs to address and fix. I'm very disappointed that this bill does not address those concerns, but Representative Benson, next year is a new year, and I look forward to working with you on this issue. Thank you.
Member from Hennepin, Representative Uglum.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Actually, my questions have been answered. Thank you.
Member from Mille Lacs, Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Speaker Simon. Members, this is duplicative, and I think Representative Drazkowski was explaining it very well. We have 4 cultural councils in this state that we fund very generously, and they are all liaisons to the governor's office, and the issues from at least those 4 cultural groups are supposed to be brought to the governor on a regular basis. I served on one of those councils for a number of years, and every issue that's delineated in this Article 2 of this Senate file is supposed to be done. So we have to hold these cultural councils accountable to what the mission is for which we fund them. And as I said, we fund them very generously. They have staff and they have office facilities. So they should be out among these communities finding out what the needs are. And if anything, this provision that Representative Moran has proposed, and I think her intentions are good, but it should have been sent as an advisory to the cultural councils. Furthermore, members, other cultures in this state have formed nonprofits. They are not funded by this legislature, and they too have gatherings at which, or formal meetings, at which they bring their constituency together to discuss the very issues that are spelled out in this Article 2 of this bill. Members, this is a redundancy, and it's something we could do without. It is growing government.
The member from Wabasha, Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, Mr. Speaker, if Representative Moran would yield.
She will yield. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Moran, I've done a little bit of research on this particular article of the bill, and apparently it was you had a standalone bill that apparently was rolled into Representative Benson's bill that I think it's the same language, House File 310, I believe it was. Are you familiar with have you read the fiscal note for it? It does actually say in the fiscal note that DHS has been operating this advisory body for almost 2 years with the department's existing resources. Can you describe for us what that relationship has been?
Representative Moran.
Thank you, Speaker. Representative Drazkowski, what I can do for you is tell you that the bill that I introduced has no fiscal note. And also, in response to the fact that I have heard over more than once that this council is duplicating the efforts of the councils of color. And I would say it does not. The councils of colors that we have are doing an excellent job. You know, thank goodness that they have staff and facility to do the work that needs to be done, which is huge. As we look at disparities over every department, they are impacted, as I said before, real people's lives. So the work they're doing to engage communities to create better outcomes is really important. The difference in what they do and what this council, one of the differences that is different is that you have a body of councils who are representing diverse communities. They come together and then they come before the legislature with a report. The legislature have decisions to make, whether or not they're going to take those recommendations into considerations or not. So often those recommendations are not taken into considerations, which is maybe why we have such huge disparities. This council, what they would do is that they are in a position to be at the table with the commissioner and really bring decisions to the commissioners around current programs, services, statutes that are currently in law that are, we can say in some ways, are disproportionately impacting the outcomes of communities of color. So what this council will bring to the table that the councils of colors are not is real peoples who have issues within different, whether it's mental health, whatever field that may be. It is a composition of all of those councils come together in one council here to talk about what is best to work in their community so that the commissioner herself can, on their behalf, bring those concerns as we are creating laws and policies and systems that are impacting not just one community, but the diverse communities that represent the state of Minnesota.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Moran. Well, Representative Moran, there is a fiscal note for the bill. It's HF 310-1E, but there's no cost on the fiscal note. There's no cost reflected in it, but there is a fiscal note, and the text of the note at one point says, also, DHS has been operating this advisory body for almost 2 years with the department's existing resources. As such, any costs associated with supporting the work of the council cannot be assumed to be a new cost to the agency attributable to the passage of this bill. So they are already doing this. They are already paying for the things in the bill, and I was going to ask about this, but seeing that the fiscal note helps better understand. They are going to, they are going to be, if this bill passes and is signed into law, and they have been over the last 2 years without this structure in law, been doing things like providing training and outreach to facilitate, as you see on 13.15, an annual report to prepare and submit a report to the chairs and ranking minority members of the committees of the House of Representatives and Senate, which I would maintain probably are not reflected in this fiscal note, would be my guess. So I would suspect, Representative Moran and Representative Benson, that there will be costs to putting this bill into law that are not accurately reflected in the fiscal note. Hereby again, once again, setting us up for additional contributions to a future deficit because we are spending items that are not accounted for. And lastly, members, Mr. Speaker and Representative Moran, I would mention that you brought up earlier solutions and that the groups represented in this bill are looking for solutions. Well, the downfall is this, that your answer to bringing forward solutions is bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger government. And the reality is that if we need solutions, we can better find them in reforming government and dictating to government the reforms that we need to bring forward so that they do a better job of bringing the solutions that you and every other member of this House would like to bring forward on behalf of their constituents. That's the other way to do it. That's how we live within our means, and the direction we're going very clearly illustrates the failures that are being brought forward in this legislature. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Members, before we go to the next speaker, I want to introduce a former distinguished member of this body who served from Cottage Grove from 2007 to 2011, former Representative Carla Bigham. Member from Hennepin, Representative Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to urge members to support this bill. I don't know which is, we have a crisis here with health disparities among minority populations, and I don't know which is worse, that or the student achievement gap. By 2045, more than half of the population in the U.S. will be persons of color, and what studies have shown is that the economic and opportunity costs associated with disparities are shared by everyone through money spent on medical care and lost productivity in the workforce. And what our own Department of Health has found is that the first step in reducing health disparities is to identify where gaps exist in our current healthcare system. And one gap, and the gaps that they've identified and that this bill is intended to address, is that in our current healthcare system, data collection is fragmented. Information on race, ethnicity, or primary language is not always collected, and data is often not readily available to the public and to policymakers. And so this bill is intended to bring groups together to find ways to reduce those health disparities. We know that populations of color experience shorter lifespans, higher rates of infant mortality, higher incidence of diabetes, heart disease, cancer, and other diseases, and poorer health outcomes in general. In this country, it would give you an extreme example where my father comes from. The average life expectancy for males is still 45 years old. And this, I believe that the groups that are coming together they are the groups that have the expertise in how is it that this our healthcare system is going to be able to reduce those health disparities by whether it's through providing access to affordable health care, strengthening our healthcare workforce, investing in prevention, and most importantly, improving the data to more accurately document those health disparities. So members, please vote green on this bill. Thank you.
Member from Anoka, Representative Runbeck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I wonder if Representative Moran would yield for a question or two.
She will yield. Representative Runbeck.
And Representative Moran, if I understand it, the Cultural and Ethnic Community Council, that's your bill? And I wanted to address that specifically. I wanted to find out if, as you see this council, is its business going to be something like promoting English language learning, or will it be encouraging high school graduation? Does that fall into the area of what it's going to work on?
Representative Moran.
Thank you, Speaker. I think if that would help reduce the disparities, then maybe that's something we need to think about.
Representative Runbeck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Moran, does the vision that you have for this group, would it include encouraging young girls to wait until marriage to become pregnant and have children?
Representative Moran.
Thank you, Speaker. I think the vision I have for this bill is that we have a community of people who are empowered to have a voice in the decision-making process, to be informed, to be educated, and to be engaged.
Representative Runbeck.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would also ask about, and you mentioned it, the minority achievement gap. You know, there are, when we look at trying to address poverty and disparities, I guess it's the same thing, I'm not sure, but there's a formula. I mean, kids need to graduate from high school. Immigrant communities need to learn English. Young women need to wait until they're married to have children. There's some real basics, and then we need to get jobs. If we don't want folks to be in poverty and we want to encourage, you know, more and more equality, it seems to me that this is really evading and very likely to evade the solutions, the true solutions to moving a community to prosperity and equality. And you know, this feels to me, and I've looked at some of the other duties of the other councils, sounds really good. It's a feel-good kind of a thing, but if we don't have them addressing what really are the factors in poverty, in encouraging poverty or getting into poverty, how is it helpful? I guess, you know, to me it's frustrating because I think we're just looking for more ways to sort of point the finger, you know, have government pick up the pieces, broaden the social welfare programming, but that's not really the answers. So if you could please sort of fill me in on that.
She will yield. Representative Moran.
Thank you, Speaker. And Representative Runback, I think you're making my case. I really think you're making a case about why it's so important to have this community council. Because it is really, really important that as we come to better conclusions, as we come to creating better outcomes, it is vitally important that we have communities of color engaged in that conversation and not other people making the decisions for them. It is crucial that they are a part of that decision-making process. And this is why this council is needed.
Representative Runbeck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. You know, if this is the council that could do it, then why don't we write really, really tight descriptions of what we're expecting from them? What we have here looks altogether too much like, hey, go out and find more ways that more government can address things that aren't really essential to alleviating poverty in our state. So, you know, this is, to me, not a solution. We're giving a megaphone to people who want to really call for increasing government. And of course, we know that Minnesota ranks number 2 in the nation when it comes to the per capita cost of what we are offering in terms of the social welfare programming. So we go way beyond the basic safety net in Minnesota. We rank number 2 in per capita costs. Really, I don't know if we're getting anywhere. I think we're just, you know, like they say, what you subsidize, you get more of. And I think that's what we're doing, folks, and I would just urge a red vote.
Any further discussion? Representative Leidiger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to speak to this one more time because I didn't address this council, and you know, and in my thinking, the real efforts belong in the Jobs and Economic Development Division. I mean, no, I'm picking on you, Representative Mahoney. If you'd yield for a question, please.
He will yield. Representative Leidiger.
We heard in our committee the growth in the minority communities, and a lot of the we had several testifiers talk about you know, where money should be allocated in helping minority businesses. It seems to me that's where our efforts need to be, not in the human services and establishing another council and another commission and, you know, more government. It's over in jobs. It's ensuring that, you know, that we create business opportunities where people can get jobs, because that's where prosperity comes from, in the private sector. And Representative Mahoney, wouldn't you rather take that on?
Representative Mahoney.
Well, Representative Leidiger, jobs is the answer to your question is so much more complex than whether I would like to take it on. Good health, good nutrition, good schools, good job training, good jobs there and available. That all becomes part of it. And I can only address that which you kind of talked about, and that is being taken care of in the jobs bill. I think there are other places, whether it's Health and Human Services or K-12 or wellness programs, to keep children healthy, keep them in school, keep them bright and attentive in school, get them the good job when they get out, give them a sense of hope, not a sense of despair. It's all part of the package. And if you don't do one, or you do a really bad job of one or two of them, you're going to have a lot more trouble doing the other.
Representative Leidiger.
Thank you, and thank you, Representative Mahoney. See, I just think we, as Representative Erickson was saying, we have that infrastructure in place. We have those councils that are there. Here's something that's redundant when really the emphasis needs to be in promoting, jobs within the minority communities out there. And we had some great testifiers that had great ideas on how we do that. And I think creating redundant government programs just doesn't work. Thank you.
Member from Washington, Representative Detmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And would the author of the bill please yield for a question?
He will yield. Representative Detmer.
Representative Benson, thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Article 2, in terms of membership, line 1116, we're talking about 15 or more, not more than 25 members appointed by the Commissioner. Would these members of the Commission, would they be from throughout the state or just from the metro area? That's it.
Representative Benson.
Yes, I believe they'd be from throughout the state, and they also are going to come from the people who already are serving on these other ethnic commissions, because they've been working on these issues. The only thing that the bill basically does is allow these representatives to speak and sit down and visit with the commissioner directly, instead of dealing with subordinates who may or may not get the information correctly to the commissioner or inform the commissioner of problems. It's simply I see this as a good government bill. I wouldn't have authored it. I wouldn't have carried it for DHS if they hadn't assured me that it wasn't going to cost the taxpayers any money. I'm not interested in growing government, as the suggestion goes here. Bureaucracy is kind of like weeds in a garden. You got to keep hoeing and pulling it out all the time. But this is something the department itself believes would be useful. And if the commissioner of the Department of Health Services think it would be useful for him or her, then why not allow people to sit down with the commissioner when it doesn't cost any money? And as far as expenses, I don't know, we give a lot of money to this department. Are you kind of suggesting they can't do anything unless they get some more money? So what do they do all day then? So have them sit down with people who have some good suggestions to solve some problems that the department hasn't been able to deal with for lack of knowledge or lack of contact with what is happening on the ground. That's all this bill does. And then all these other things, if you and I were being asked to introduce a bill that solved all the social and political and economic problems of any ethnic group or America as a whole, we'd probably fill up this whole room with pages. All this thing does is that these people who come from these communities have a chance to sit down and talk to the commissioner. to try to give some suggestions as how the taxpayers' money can be better spent. This is a good government thing. You should also be happy because the Senate has an expiration date. March 2015, they're done. And they also have to provide some information as to whether what they did was any good. And I suspect the reason for that is if they don't achieve anything, they're gone. So we got a sunset in it. We got guarantee it doesn't cost any money, that nobody's going to get paid. All they want to do is sit down with the commissioner. Simple as pie.
Representative Detmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I guess my only question was, are we going to have representation from around the state? That's all I asked. I think you answered it first, but then you added a lot of other things. But thank you. And I really believe that if we're going to have a commission like this, that we should have representation from around the state, not just the metro area. Thank you.
The member from Sibley, Representative Gruenhagen.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I'll just make a real quick comment. I was partially not on the floor for the discussion, but I heard some discussion as far as health disparities. And the only thing I can say about that is the solution to health disparities, or the cause of it, is the government. And we simply made it worse with Obamacare. And that's one of the reasons, by the way, Representative Moran, we excluded ourselves from the exchange, okay? And also the federal legislators did the same thing. They don't want to go through that bureaucracy. They don't want 15 people micromanaging their health care. They want to see the doctor. The other thing to understand is the best doctors across this nation are withdrawing or not accepting any more patients from Medicare and Medicaid.
Mr. Speaker.
Representative Moline.
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, could you just please remind the body what matter of business is before us?
Representative Moline, we are on third reading on the bill on the concurrence. Representative Gruenhagen.
In closing, it is government that is causing dependency, causing the health disparities, and creating policies that make things worse, not better. So disparity problems in health care are going to spread. They're not going to get better under the types of bills that we passed in this legislature. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion to the bill. Representative Benson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for the discussion. I was surprised with such a simple little bill as we got into such cosmic discussion here about the future of America and the world. This is simply a very simple little thing. This is a DHS operations policy bill, nothing else. So thank you, Mr. Speaker, and discussion was fine. I would ask for the vote.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Clerk will close the roll. Hillstrom votes aye. There being 102 ayes and 28 nays, the bill is repassed as amended by the Senate and its title agreed to.
Message from the Senate. This is the Murphy M. motion. Mr. Speaker, I hereby announce that the Senate has concurred in and adopted the report of the Conference Committee on Senate File 489, an act relating to retirement. Conference Committee reports addressed to the Honorable Sandra L. Pappas, President of the Senate, the Honorable Paul Thiessen, Speaker of the House. We, the undersigned conferees for Senate File 489, report that we agreed upon the items in dispute and recommend as follows. The report is signed by all three conferees on the part of the Senate, and all three conferees on the part of the House. Murphy M. moves that the report of the Conference Committee on Senate File 489 be adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by conference.
I recognize the author of the bill, member from St. Louis, Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I have a roll call?
Roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, Senate File 489 is pretty much the same bill that left the House of Representatives. We had put House language into the Senate file number. The bill was discussed to some length on the House floor. It went to the Senate, and they, in conference committee, adopted the House language. And there's two small amendments to make it fit for the one of the things that was changed. Instead of the St. Paul police or St. Paul teachers and Duluth teachers ongoing assistance, that assistance has been, we agreed that that assistance would be for fiscal year 14 and fiscal year 15. And so the amendments were concerning that instead of the ongoing 25-year funds. The bill still saves over $500 million in costs to the various pension funds across in the state of Minnesota. The bill still has many components in it that raises contributions for employers and employees. The bill provides continued solvency that was started in the 2010 bill that this legislature passed, so that the funds that we are responsible for as legislators, setting the law for, to make sure that our state and county and city and township public officials, our police and fire, our state patrol, our teachers, have the benefits when they retire that they were promised when they began. We have addressed the issues. All issues are not solved in this bill, but we go a long way for cutting pension costs and increasing solvency and stability for our state plans. I will answer questions. I thank so much Representative Nelson and Representative Davids for their participation and contributions to the conference committee.
Further discussion to adoption of the conference report. Discussion on adoption of the conference report. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on adoption of the conference report. Clerk will close the roll. There being 78 ayes and 51 nays, the motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended by conference.
Third reading, Senate File 489 as amended by conference.
Discussion to the bill. Representative Benson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Well, as this bill left the first time and went to conference committee, I did have
Thank you.
numerous problems. Was on the pension commission and voiced those issues as that left there. There may not be many additional changes, if any. It still doesn't make it a good bill. Members, we are still left with, as it's been stated, the employee and the employer are going to make significant additional contributions. I might add that the risk, of course, to the pension commission, to the pension system, really is borne by the employer, and in this case, it's the taxpayers of Minnesota. I'm going to repeat that again. The risk of the pension system is still really basically a matter of the employer. Now, that's not to say that the employee contributions have not gone up. They have. But you really do need to understand that embedded in this is a significant increase in not only the employer-employee percentages or contributions that will be made, and sacrifices actually in some cases on the pension side, but from the general fund. A good portion of the taxes or the revenue that be required, in fact, to help the police and fire pension funds are not in this bill at all. They'll be in the tax bill, and that's to the tune of about $9 million a year. So that's not in this bill, folks. But if you add all those together, we're looking at a significant, besides the additional contributions, a significant new increase in the subsidy that the state has on these pensions. I'm going to point out a couple of things. I know I'll probably get up and speak later. There'll be a couple of more folks that were either on the commission or they know quite a bit about pensions. But I have a real particular concern, even though it's addressed somewhat, my concerns regarding the Duluth and the St. Paul Teachers Funds and their additional contributions, plus the amount of money that the state's going to add to it will potentially blink off in 2 years, is the fact that that contribution is $13 million a year. Now, that wasn't their original ask. The original ask was about double that, because they were asking that their pensioners, or the folks that are getting the annuity, get a 2% COLA increase. And just to be reminded of the fact that I brought this up last time, that it was the Duluth Teachers Fund, in fact, that came to us in 2010 in their dire straits and said, we'll agree not to take any COLA increases whatsoever until we reach 80%. Well, folks, you probably got the numbers in front of you, but they're not even close. They're about 62%, and they were back before us at the beginning of the commission deliberations asking for 2%, which would have cost the people of the state of Minnesota an additional $14 million a year. Well, just given the state of that pension fund, and kind of as a reminder, in Duluth, for example, only 2 years ago, they had about 1,100 teachers. But because of declining enrollment and demographics, they're at 919 active members in their pension fund. However, they have total members of 3,355. So you have 919 teachers holding up a pension fund of over 3 times that amount. That's a recipe for disaster, and thankfully in the conference deliberations I wasn't a part of, we did get to, and this was part of the conversation in the commission, of course, that we're going to do it for 2 years, but we're going to have a study. Well, that sounds good. I was one of those who kind of pushed for it. In fact, pushed back hard enough that the Duluth teachers pension folks said, okay, well, we won't take a 2%, we'll only take a 1%. It was a me too. It was a me too because the TRA gets 1%, and they didn't want to be left out of that. They didn't want to have to go back to the people that they represent and say, you're going to get 0, but everybody else is getting 1. It was a me too. So we pressed on them, we're going to get a study. And the study really is, and as the conversations in the Pension Commission went, is it about time to look at how we're going to combine them with the TRA. Understanding the TRA is about 70,000 people putting in. If you looked at that science, the actuarial science and the risk involved and so on, it would make sense that if these folks are going to continue to get the money that has been promised to them at all, that they were going to have to be combined. And I know somebody else is going to speak to the specifics of that, so I'll leave that alone. I'm going to get to one really important factor here, is that who the study is going to be done by. Now, you would think that we'd have somebody doing a study as an outside contractor with no conflict. Okay, I'll put it as clear as I can. No conflict of interest. But in fact, the people who are going to do the study are the TRA, who they themselves are $6 billion in the tubes. All right? There's $6 billion and they're going to do the study. Now, if I were them, of course, I would say that the only way that we're going to take these two other pensions is to say we need a massive infusion of additional capital. Now, the science is going to speak for itself, but it doesn't really make sense to have the pension people from a plan who's $6 billion in the hole trying to calculate or figure out how in the world we're going to take in two other terribly failing pension funds. I don't know. Common sense in my mind would say or dictate an absolute no. I want to point out one other thing, and this is kind of the gift that keeps on giving. I use it every time I stand up to talk about pensions, and that's Representative Khan's statement. She's not in here. I'm sure she knew I was going to use it again. Just from the fact that in prior years, when we got these pensions to 100%, in some cases over 100%, this legislative body couldn't help themselves. They couldn't help themselves in saying, oh, they have not been getting, the annuitants are not getting nearly enough raises to keep up with inflation. We have got to help them out, and we've got to bump them up in terms of what they're getting. Well, I've got a 15-year history of what they've gotten. And let me tell you, from 1998 to 2000, when we were at the peak of, man, we're doing good, TRA got an average of 9% a year increase. With the highest of those years being in 2000, they got an 11% increase in their annuity. Well, if you just did simple math and added those all together, that's a 45%, but you can't do it that way, right? You have to extrapolate in that it's compounding as you go. This was greater than 45% increase in their annuity in 5 years. Now, who assumes the risk of that? This is like lesson 101, right? We started with the employer. Who's the employer in this case? The people paying the bills. That's just TRA. Here's the Duluth Teachers Fund. They got a 37.5% increase over those same years, with a 37.5 over 5 years, 7.5 per year average. Same exact number practically for the St. Paul Teachers Fund. Numbers, folks, are going to pop up, and I could add more, but we're going to add and make sure everybody gets a little. Folks, what we don't even begin to address is whether or not this is sustainable. Only 20% private sector businesses have maintained their defined benefit plans. Why? Because they can't do anything other than move to something that allows for the people who are counting on these pensions. Now, I'm not speaking against annuitants. I get one. But we've got to design a system that allows for them, when they start employment, to know the money's going to be there when they're needing it the most. They're not working anymore. You know, many of these same defined benefit plans across the country, from California to Puerto Rico, are going belly up because they're unsustainable. In fact, Puerto Rico, the entire state, has a $37 billion unfunded liability. They absolutely knew they had to do something different. So just this year, they moved from a defined benefit to a hybrid system, with a small basis of defined benefit so people could count on it, but the greater portion of what they're going to get when they retire is what they contribute and their employee contribute in a defined contribution plan. We tried to have a little discussion about those things in the Pension Commission, but that was squelched pretty quickly. As I said, as this bill left out of here, the judge's plan, for example, all I wanted to do was to add an option for a defined contribution plan, and it was shot down. Folks, we're not helping retirees if we don't give them a system that they can absolutely count on. Why? Because eventually, the people that got to foot the bill, for the most part, the taxpayers of the state of Minnesota. I'm not to say that these aren't taxpayers too, but the great bulk of them are not paying in what's needed. The taxpayers of Minnesota, they're going to get to a point where we can't afford this anymore, and then what are we going to do? What are we going to be left with? We're going to be left with a system that is broken, and we coulda, woulda, shoulda when there was time, and we didn't. I'm sure I'm not done. There's more things I'd like to say. There's other people that like to speak. But members, I don't have any doubt there's going to be enough votes on the other side to pass this bill. No doubt. But that doesn't make us any less irresponsible. All right? In 2 years, we're going to come back and we're going to find out that the TRA team has said, guess what? We need probably $200 or $300 million over the next 3 or 4 years to take in the Duluth Pension Fund. I want you to think about that. What did we just add to higher education? $250 million. What did we take from HHS? $50 million. What is it going to take 2 small pension plans into the TRA? We don't have any real good idea, but it is a substantial amount of money when just to try to keep them afloat for a couple of years, we need practically $25, $30 million a year. Is that good management? Are we being good management? Is Representative Kahn right in her statement that we were pretty irresponsible back in the late 90s and the early 2000s when we just give money hand over fist away? We don't have a great track record. Thank you.
Member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the author of the bill yield?
She will yield. Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And looking at this, not having been involved in the committee, I'm just curious, a few things pop out. There are a lot of assumptions made in these bills, and I understand that that's appropriate. However, I see a higher assumption for the raises going to Duluth and St. Paul teachers than any other designated group in the bill. That's on page 25, lines 40 and 41. Why is there the assumption that these 2 groups are going to get higher raises than any other designated group in the bill?
Representative Murphy.
Representative Quam, that's Mr. Martin tells me that's the payroll growth assumption, and that's the amount of money that's needed to realize the amounts of money that has to be raised for the pension, the people that are receiving the pensions. Representative Quam, you can't assume that Duluth and St. Paul are like the others. The amount of state aid that has come to Duluth in relation to any other state plan is minuscule, or the smallest amounts over the last 100 years. There are many, because of the cities of the first class, when TRA got increases, the cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul and Duluth didn't get any assistance from the state. Duluth has been almost 100% funded almost all the 100 years they've been in existence. In the 2007, they were 100% funded. But with the changes in demographics and the economy and the flight of students from 709 and the charter schools, teachers having to join TRA, and the MnSCU teachers having to join the TRA. Substantial numbers of teachers had to withdraw from the Duluth plan. And that's when the downhill started. If you look, to answer your the question that you first brought up, look on page 203, please. And there's a change in the pay growth assumptions for Duluth and St. Paul at 3.50 for Duluth and 4 for St. Paul.
Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are a couple of additional differences I'd like explained, but I don't understand. You mentioned in response cities of the first class. And Rochester cities of first class, so maybe adding to if she would yield.
She will yield. Representative Quam.
I had the next question on my list was on page 199, lines 24 and 25, the post-retirement interest rate assumptions for the two school retirement funds is 142% that of the assumptions of the interest returns on any other designated, and I don't understand if you can get that much better return, then why not all? But when you answer that, can you also enlighten me as to, since Rochester is a larger city and during that decline period of time has grown, I believe they've got more teachers now. They have above the state average of minority students, over 70 languages spoken in the classrooms. Duluth is below. So I'm trying to understand how much more aid did the Rochester retirement get put into there than Duluth, since Duluth's obviously disadvantaged, as you say it. So those two questions, please.
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Quam, Rochester has always been part of TRA. Duluth has always been Duluth Teachers Retirement Fund. St. Paul has been St. Paul Teachers Retirement Fund. And Minneapolis has always been Minneapolis. But now they're part, because of the merger that happened just whenever it happened a few years back, Minneapolis is part of TRA also. So the only two plans that are not part of TRA are Duluth and St. Paul. Rochester has, to my knowledge, and I've only been on the Pension Commission for 17 years, but to my knowledge, Rochester has always been part of the TRA. And they have never been separate. There haven't been separate plans. And over time, there have been smaller plans. And slowly over time, and I know that's a subject that we're starting to discuss, and certainly Governor Dayton wants us to discuss it not as slowly, is more consolidation, getting more stability to the small plans by bringing them into the whole and having fewer plans. And that's happening. That happened with police and fire a few years back. It's happened with other small plans have been merged into the larger plans with PRA. But specifically, I can't answer a question specifically about Rochester.
Representative Quam.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I understand that, but earlier you had mentioned that so much more money had gone to the districts in the TRA. I thought maybe since that was a similar sized district to one that is being addressed, and the only one that's of a city of the first class that wasn't included there, you might have that information. And I understand that you probably don't have the detailed reasoning why you would assume that these two would get so much, 142% of the expected rate of return assumption post-retirement than any of the other groups. I've got one last closing question, if the author would yield. She will yield. Representative Quam. Thank you. On page 132, line 32, there's a deletion of, in reference to the St. Paul teachers, a deletion of a end date at the end of 2009. And there's addition in that same section for the Duluth. In reading that, it looks as if we're taking off any end date and we're allowing in perpetuity, forever possibly, putting funds into this. And I'm trying to understand, first of all, previously it was supposed to have ended years ago, so now we're adding it back in. So even if we did have an end date, that's no guarantee, but wouldn't it be better? And why is the justification for not having any date in there, since obviously we can just change that? So I'll boil it back down. Why is there a perpetual contribution being built in with this and not having some sort of a sunset date?
Representative Quam, you asked Representative Murphy to yield. Would you like to ask someone else to yield instead? Representative Quam.
So, Mr. Speaker, you're indicating that she doesn't understand why we added in the conference report the in perpetuity for these funds?
Representative Quam, no. I was inviting you to perhaps, based on some hand motions at the back of the room, to invite someone else to yield. You had specifically asked Representative Murphy to yield, but it looks as if there may be someone else who wishes to answer that question if you look in the direction of Representative Murphy.
Mr. Speaker, I notice a distinguished, esteemed colleague that may have the answer to this. Would she yield to a question?
Representative Khan will yield. Representative Kwan, would you wish to restate your question, Representative Kwan?
Yes, thank you. Representative Khan, on page 132, near the bottom, line 32, there's a end date of December 31st, 2009 in reference to the St. Paul fund. And then there's added language in reference to the Duluth fund. My impression is that allows forever us to be pumping money in there, without an end date. And I guess what is the logic behind that, and why not, if you delete the old date, put in a new target, hoping that they'll reach it?
Representative Kahn.
Mr. Speaker and members, the problem is that you have to read in depth through all these pension plans because they can't be understood in isolation. The exact same criteria is in the TRA plan, which covers all of the plans throughout the state, except it's an implicit assumption in the TRA plan, and it's an explicit assumption in the St. Paul and Duluth plan. So you see it separately, but it's following exactly the same as the plans for all the rest of the state. It's just that unless you read the plan in detail, which I assume you haven't done, you don't see it because it's an implicit assumption.
Representative Quam.
Thank you. Because we're giving special attention and specially designating funds, I thought there was some special difference with these two plans that are poorly designed, apparently, because they need our extra assistance. So I'll sit down and let it going on. This bill doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and frankly, I don't understand why the taxpayers across the state are making up for the mistakes of some localities. Thank you.
Representative Kahn.
Well, Mr. Speaker and members, the taxpayers across the state have made all of the other pension plans whole as they've brought them into TRA or have kept TRA whole. When we brought Minneapolis into the plan, and one can go back as to the state laws that specifically caused the problems for Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Duluth. But when Minneapolis was brought in 2006 at a fairly large expense to the state, I don't know the exact number, but we can get it. And we can bring, we might like to bring St. Paul and Duluth both into the state plan, but in order to hold the rest of the state harmless, it would take an infusion of state money to do that. Duluth has a particular problem because of the demographic, the things that are totally beyond their control in terms of things. It has not been it has not been bad pension planning or bad other assumptions. It's really they've been hit by the demographic changes that have hit Duluth. And so we could take care of them. We could put them into the much bigger state plan so that there would be, the whole state would take care of it instead of having to do these difficult appropriations each year. But the reason we don't is that to keep the state plan whole, as we did with Minneapolis, we'd have to do it with a large infusion of money, and we just don't have it at this point.
Further discussion? Representative Albright.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm wondering if Representative Murphy would stand for a few questions.
She will yield. Representative Albright.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, in my workaday, we deal with retirement programs, and when it comes to this, it is a bit of a troublesome topic because we're dealing with structural issues that not only are problematic for pensions, but they're problematic in terms of how people across the board have to deal with successfully achieving the goals for the retirement. And when you deal with this, it really comes down to four fundamental criteria. You have to deal with the demographics that you're looking at. You have to consider the actuarial assumptions that are pertinent to a defined benefit plan. the contractual arrangements that are on the books now and going into the future, and the tails, if you will, in terms of how you might have to address those. But more symptomatic, as we have found out over the last 30 years, is the longevity of the participants. And unfortunately, the defined benefit programs that were established many, many years ago did not contemplate that longevity amongst the participants was going to increase as rapidly as it has over the last 10 years. In our business, it is symptomatic of a revolution, if you will, going away from defined benefit plans and actually incorporating into the discussion a defined contribution, 401k, 403b, recognizing members that it is not a diversion away from the responsibilities of the state or the employer for the contractual obligations that they have promised, but anticipating that in the future changes are necessary in order to address those four issues. And so my question for Representative Murphy is, in light of those criteria, Representative Murphy, how does this bill address those structural problems?
Representative Murphy.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Albright, it works toward a solution by continuing what we started in 2010 by having plans not to controls on plans so they won't continue to grow. We're adding individual contributions, increasing individual contributions. We are increasing employer contributions. We are, in the case of police and fire, State Patrol, increasing the vesting time periods. In the 2010 bill, we decreased assumptions from 8.5 to 8. And that is, we put a timeline for only 5 years, at which time we will again look at the changing the assumption rates. I totally agree with you on your 4 points and what you're saying about the fourth point. Previous years, in my era, we had the rule of 90. That has disappeared. Since 1989, new hires do not have that. We are leveling in TRA. We are leveling the people that are still eligible to retire, so that we are providing a leveling circumstance so that it will not those that do retire will not create such a dip. But most people now are not retiring that are in these plans that are eligible, are not retiring at 57 or 58 when they become eligible. They're much more likely to retire at 62, 63, 66 in there.
Representative Albright.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm wondering if Representative Murphy would continue to yield.
She will yield. Representative Albright.
Thank you, Representative Murphy, and I appreciate that the topic at hand is somewhat nebulous, and we are getting down in the weeds, but I think it's an important subject, particularly as we, as the employer to these folks and the supporter of the good work that they're doing for the state, we want to make sure that we're holding good to our promises, and we want to make sure that we follow through, because they're putting their lives on the line on a daily basis, whether they be firefighters, whether they be police and law enforcement, as well as state patrol. And so I want to be very respectful of their work, and this is in no way to decry their efforts. We certainly want to be rewarding of that. One of the other questions in the provisions of the bill that I would appreciate for you to talk to is that I see that there is a change in the disability definition as it would pertain to retirees and or how payments are realized. And I would just ask if you would respond to the changes that were and are made in the definition of disability and how it affects those people that would realize a benefit from that pension plan.
Representative Murphy.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Albright, that's in that section, definition section of PRA. That tightens the definition of disability, and we go on. We tightened it once before, and this creates a greater understanding, so fewer people in the past there were some abuses of the reasoning for the disability, and we are making that tighter now. When we made the first effort to tighten, we had remarkable successes to the costs of the plans, and we expect this will continue, that we will be saving, there will be savings with that new definition. And if it's not, we're certainly going to come back and look at it again.
Representative Albright.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Murphy, in your earlier comments, you made a reference to that you are making a change to the vesting schedule for those that would be provided a benefit under this plan. And I understand that there is some ramifications in terms of how people might view that that are currently in the system. I'm wondering if you would just speak to that in terms of any consequences or actions that participants might take based upon a change in the vesting schedule. Would she yield?
She will yield. Representative Murphy.
Representative Albright, I think Representative Johnson brought that to our attention during the debate on the floor going out, in the sense that there might be a mad rush in 2014, June 30th. We don't know if that's going to happen. We hope that won't happen. But they're changing it. And this was a recommendation by the group of people that worked for a long period of time to come up with the proposals of how the police and fire could become more stable, the whole plan for the future. And that group's consensus or agreement was to change from 10 from where they were at to 10 and 20 years investing. If this plan works, if the total package works for them, I think we'll be talking about that subject again, because we haven't had that big of a period of time for experience in any other plan. And so we're going to have to visit to see how what are the consequences of that vesting. But I think it was very brave and courageous of them to make that offer. But I think it behooves us, for all the reasons that you said, that we value their service a lot, that this would not be undue punishment. But we'll see. And we have to look at it again. Any component that has undue consequences, we have to look at again and change. But we are also going to be watching to see what experience we have with these new provisions that reduce some of the benefits.
Representative Albright.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm wondering if Representative Johnson B. would stand for a question.
He will yield. Representative Albright.
Representative Johnson, I understand that in hearing the response by Representative Murphy as well as hearing it as well, I'm wondering if you'd be willing to elaborate on the question of the consequences of the changes to the vesting period as it would pertain to pensioners coming out of these plans.
Representative Johnson.
Mr. Speaker, members, Representative Albright, working with the pair and talking to them, the vesting issue is a little bit of an issue, but the bigger issue is the hard date of the change of the plan. We could have a real big issue at that date come May or January. Actually, it'll end up being forced in May of 2014 with the July 1st change of the plan. We're looking at well over 1,000 officers possibly starting to retiring in May, and our current education system does not have enough positions to fill the highly qualified officers that are going to be leaving.
Representative Albright.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the concerns, and I've seen it in the notes and I've seen it in the bill, is the actuarial assumptions that are being addressed in this, and I know that this was brought up in GovOps, and I know that there are some concerns by the members of that. I'm just wondering if Representative Nelson, if he's on the floor. He is not. I'm wondering if Representative Murphy would speak to and yield for a question with regard to the actuarial assumptions and the changes that occurred in the pension plans.
She will yield.
Representative Murphy, it's no secret that a number of the plans that we're talking about in this bill are substantially unfunded. And as we talk about the demographics in terms of putting money in, there's two ways to equalize the pressure on this valve. You can either put in more money or assume a higher rate of return, which reduces the amount of contribution. And I'm just wondering, in terms of balancing those 2 points against one another, if you could speak to the conversations that have been undertaken by the Pension Committee in terms of addressing what side is more responsible in terms of requiring of the employer more contributions, or is there an understanding that the rate of return, the actuarial assumption that is currently, I understand, 8%, dropped down from 8.5%. I'm just wondering if you could speak to, in terms of the dialogue or the what went into the assumptions that arrived at an 8% actuarial assumption for growth on money going forward, if she would yield.
Representative Murphy.
The past legislative committee, or legislative LCPR, looked at several different methods, and we also looked at hybrid, and we know that there are some proposals, some states that are doing things differently, but there didn't seem to be, at the time that we were looking, there didn't seem to be a whole lot of experience, time periods. We heard and heard suggestions of how we should try this or try that, but there weren't, and that some other groups were trying something or another, but there was no scientific or experience-rated programs that we could look at as a model. We discussed for a whole legislative session a variety of things. Representative Lanning was determined that we were going to have several different options. We had the director of Legislative Pension Association organization or something come up and speak to us also, as well as other noted people with plans, but we did not have a long enough period of time to delve into during session time, and during the interim we had set meetings, but from meeting to meeting we didn't have homework to do. And I think that if we were going to truly develop a different method or a different model, we have to have a concerted effort during the interim to do something like that. And then when we started this session, we just went to immediate need, to immediate need, to immediate need, and a lot of individual bills kind of things which are contained in this plan. And so we didn't have any long meetings where we were discussing and philosophizing and routing out what we really need to do. I expect we will continue to do that. I personally have just accepted a 2-day invitation to go to a conference with people that are working in pensions from other states to talk about some new common issues and new solutions. I'm very interested in the topic, and I'm committed to trying to do better. And I plan to go to that, and that's in June, which is a precious time for one who hasn't been home to get the lawn and garden started in an order. Of course, I couldn't get them in order because we have snow on the ground up to last weekend, but it's calling me. But this meeting is in June, and I intend to accept the invitation. I don't know exactly if that's what you're answering, but we have to continue discussion. And we have to continue more than discussion. We have to continue learning. And we have to continue to expose ourselves to ideas other than the traditional idea that has been brought to us by our predecessors.
Representative Albright.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Just maybe a couple final comments and a question for Representative Murphy, which if she would continue to yield.
She will yield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate your homework assignment over the summer, Representative Murphy, and I look forward to assisting you in understanding what is best for the state, as well as for those people that are for the sake of their retirement and for their families, looking forward to this body taking on the hard task of and answering the hard questions about how to remedy the situation that puts at our doorstep an unfunded liability that runs into, candidly, over the lives of these people, hundreds of millions of dollars. And as Representative Benson said, I think quite well, this is not a problem that is of a small nature. This dwarfs, in comparison, some of the other issues that this body will have to undertake in terms of funding for the best interests, those that this body serves. And to that point, Representative Murphy, and I know that you've spoke to this in terms of that you've modified the actuarial assumption down from 8.5% to 8%, and I'm just wondering if, with reflection upon dropping it to 8%, if there was any change or adoption of any new ideas or constraints or resolution in terms of the allocation of resources within these trusts, these pension plans, in terms of to achieve that 8%. Because candidly, from an industry perspective, an 8% rate of return would be considered on the aggressive side. And so I'm just wondering if that is a sustainable rate of return, and if you hope to achieve it, what methodology are you undertaking in order to do so?
Representative Murphy.
In the fiscal year that we're in and will be closing, so far we have returns of 14%. And so a hope and a prayer continues those on. But we also had put in place an experience study that will come due in a year's time, that we will be able to formulate recommendations. Today I don't have a more precise answer to your question.
Representative Albright.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm just going to refer back to my opening comments, members. We are living in the coming ashore of the silver tsunami. If you take a look at the number of folks that are in their 50s and 60s, the boomer generation is quickly coming ashore. And what we're finding out, in my experience, is that they either want a pill, a place, or a part to continue their lifestyle as they would want. And that exacerbates the problem that we find with this bill. And as Representative Benson has articulated, and I'm sure others will as I close out my comments, this is not of a small nature. And I think as we take a look at what we were going to have to address in sessions to come, this will become one of the top 3 issues that we will have to face and address. And some hard questions are going to have to be answered to, and a reckoning in terms of how do we close the gap for the funding that these groups are entitled, we have made them entitled to, but going forward, how do we close that gap? Through, as Representative Murphy said, through alternative options that are going to be on the table in years to come, but there is a day of reckoning, and this is just the hint of what we will have to deal with in sessions to come. Thank you.
Representative Khan.
Well, Mr. Speaker and members, Listening to Representative Albright, it becomes crystal clear why we delegate the responsibility for doing this to the State Board of Investment instead of leaving it in the legislature. The pensions are paid for about, well, the total financial viability of a pension plan is about 2/3 due to investment and about 1/3 due to contributions, if I remember those facts correctly. We were really hit by the recession in the last few years when our investment portfolio went so bad that the groups that were just invested in cash and banks were doing better than we were. But as we said, the calendar year last year, the State Board of Investment returned to 14.5%. Now, I would not make any assumptions that we're going to continue at 14.5% for a period of time, but that 14.5% looks as if our 8% is not far off, plus the fact that we're going to look at it again. We're going to look at it again at the end of 5 years, as was determined in Representative Lanning's pension bill. If we want to look at history, we can go back to 1969 when the legislature was controlled by Republicans, and in that year, House File 1, so it's clearly their most important bill, the way we do these things, changed TRA from defined contribution to defined benefit. That's kind of an easy thing to do if you put a certain amount of money up front as you do it, but it's very hard to go back in the other direction because you've got to cover all of the people on a defined benefit plan without their money going into financing the defined contribution plan. So, I'm sorry the legislature in 1969 did that. We would obviously be in a different place if they hadn't, but we're now trying to make up for that.
Further discussion? Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, Representative Kahn, recent history does not suggest that we should plan on that when we're talking about a 14% return the last year. If you look at the returns from 2000 to 2010, the market was basically flat. And I think Representative Benson told us that some of the numbers of the increases that were given out in TRA, which is the flagship that we're holding out here as the ends to meet everything. An individual who would have had a $30,000 pension in 1998 ended up with a pension of $45,000 within 5 years. Now that was irresponsible. And I understand that we're trying to put some stopgaps in. But Representative Murphy, if we continue to answer questions as Representative Albright continued to ask these questions, we were always answering them in the framework of what we have now. And the framework is a dinosaur. Albert Einstein called compounding the eighth wonder of the world. And when you're investing, it works fantastic. But when you're starting to pay out, and the compounding rate that we saw from 98 to 2002, for example, was ridiculous. We were looking at 8, 9, 10%, and that's the problem that we're having today. Because now our retirees are in their 60s and 70s. And we have a responsibility to pay them throughout their lifetime. And now life expectancies are in the, if you get to 65 to 70, you're in your 87 for females, 82 for males. We have a major responsibility here. So we have to be looking at other avenues. And the business community has survived because they do things intelligently with data-driven decisions, and that's why they're going to defined contributions so that they can plan budget-wise to be prepared to pay out all their retirees. Defined benefits is a dinosaur that does not work anymore. Mr. Speaker, if Representative Murphy would yield to a question, please.
She will yield. Representative Kelly.
Representative Murphy, I just have one technical question for you. I think in the first bill there was a $5 surge charge on insurance policies. I know that's going away, but I also believe that was set to blink off when we got to a certain percentage. Now that $9 million infusion, will that also blink off?
Representative Murphy.
Representative Kelly, that was not my bill. That was Representative Atkins' bill. And now that is in the tax bill. And I'm not on the tax committee, and I don't know. I am not an author. We heard the bill in Pension Commission, and then it went on. But perhaps Representative Atkins can answer.
Mr. Speaker, would Representative Atkins yield?
Representative Kelly. Representative Atkins will yield. Representative Kelly.
Representative Atkins, could you let the body know if that will blink off that $9 million infusion now?
Mr. Speaker, Representative Kelly, it's a challenging time for me to hear what you said. I believe that you asked about the surcharge proposal relative to the firefighter police pension. Is that correct?
Representative Kelly.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Atkins, that is correct. We the first bill, I believe, proposed the $5 surcharge on policies. That, I understand, is off. Now will be an infusion of $9 million, and I'm wondering if that will also blink off then when we meet our percentages.
Representative Atkins.
And thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Kelly. I appreciate you repeating the question. First, it's important to note that there no longer is the $5 surcharge proposal being promoted, and then my understanding is that it will come to a conclusion at the 50% figure in terms of 50% funding, but I'm clarifying that as we speak, and will provide you with additional information.
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll await that answer. Thank you. Would Representative Murphy yield to another question, please?
She will yield. Representative Kelly.
Representative Murphy, I understand that and I appreciate the fact that you're talking about working on this in the future, but what I'm curious about is, have we given a directive or have we taken a stance that we want to seriously look at converting this from a defined benefit program to a defined contribution plan?
Representative Murphy.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Kelly, no.
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, members, I think we have a serious problem, as Representative Albright, Representative Benson have also indicated. We have a very serious problem. And if we continue to bury our heads in the sand, we will be talking about this at a much more severe level, because we will be talking about not being able to be payroll out of the 50,000 people that we are responsible for. The only way to move forward is to move this plan and to make sure that we do it as quickly as possible. I believe that we should make a concerted effort. If we're talking about a committee and a studying group, that should be their directive, because we owe it to the people that have been in these professions, and we owe it as fiduciary responsibility to take care of them. So I would urge that we would do that instead of our traditional kicking the can down the road. Mr. Speaker, I see Representative Atkins may have an answer for us.
Representative Atkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Kelly, I think I may have said 50%, that it'll end at 50. It's actually 90%. It's not my place to be asking you a question, but I just wanted to make sure. Are you arguing for a defined contribution plan for cops and firefighters, or to continue the defined benefit?
Representative Kelly.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker. Representative Atkins, would you please repeat that question, please?
Representative Atkins.
Absolutely. And for those watching at home, because I'm sure there's like 9 people sitting, eating Doritos watching us today, it's a challenge for where he sits and where I sit for us to hear one another sometimes. But I just wanted to find out, are you arguing then on behalf of, for firefighters and police officers, for a defined contribution plan rather than a defined benefit plan?
Representative Kelly.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Atkins, I would suggest for all the employees that we have a responsibility for, that we should be absolutely be looking at a defined contribution plan. Absolutely.
Member from Hennepin, Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I have many concerns that the
several of the legislators have already talked about. So I'm just going to focus on one little part that I don't know that's been addressed that I think that members should take a look at and we should get an understanding of. I'm wondering if Representative Murphy would yield to a question.
She will yield. Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Representative Murphy. Tucked away in the back on page 212 of the bill, under Article 15, is a part that disturbs me very much, and it's a part that would require the retirement plans would mandate them to deduct from the retirement annuity an amount requested for membership dues, union dues, or other payments to any labor organization. So essentially we're asking our retirement plans to act as a bank, and I'm wondering, Representative Murphy, why that's in there, and if this is typical. Should we be forcing the retirement plans to do deductions for gym dues or mortgage payments perhaps? I'm trying to figure out why we would mandate the retirement system do this on behalf of the union.
Representative Murphy.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Pepin, this is the same type of question that you asked at Government Operations, and as the bill moved through, we have not changed that at all. It is something that the pension plans plan directors testified to, that they could make these deductions and produce these mailings at no cost. If there was a cost, in the sense, no cost of setting up or changing their operations in any way, they are already doing it for the dues of the retirees to the organizations, and if they want to put another thing in, if there was if the members wanted to do something else, the cost would go back to the organization. The pension plan would have no added costs, and their system is set up to create this service. And so they had no objection to being asked to do something. I don't think that they would ever serve as a bank.
Representative Pepin.
Mr. Speaker, if Representative Murphy would continue to yield.
She will yield. Representative Pepin.
Well, Representative Murphy, when we're requiring them to do something, this isn't, it used to be may, and we're changing it to shall. My concern is that I don't know how there cannot be a cost if we're requiring them at the wish of, and I understand that the retiree can make that decision, but if we're requiring them to do this, they essentially are acting as a bank. I don't know why that would be any different than forcing them to do a deduction for union or for mortgage payments or union dues or any other automatic deduction. And I think that's really unfortunate. I think I don't think that's the right thing to do, and I think it sends the wrong message. Further, if you look at section further down, it talks about any labor organization that is an exclusive bargaining agent representing public employees or organization representing public employees may conduct blind mailings to the annuitants of a retirement system by requesting that the retirement system mail voluntary membership information and dues. So the way I read this, any union can tell the retirement system that you have to, I understand that they're going to pay for it, but they have to say, you have to mail this information on unions. And then at the end of the page it says, the retirement system shall have no obligation to approve or disapprove or otherwise be responsible for the content of the mailings. So the retirement system doesn't even have the ability to look at whatever the union is sending out and to make a decision on whether or not it's appropriate. And I'm wondering how you can justify doing this in the bill. I don't find that is right. If the union can do that, why shouldn't any other organization be able to do the same thing? For example, someone on the other side of the political aisle, why shouldn't they be able to also then demand that our state retirement system send out mailings on our behalf without being able to even approve if they're appropriate or not?
Representative Murphy.
Mr. Speaker, this was never my initiative, but I understand that it came about, the original method of doing this came about as a compromise with the Plenty administration during those years. This is a continuation of that with an addition.
Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative Murphy. I know that this wasn't your initiative, so I think I'll change my question if Representative Nelson, who I believe authored this section, would yield to a few questions.
He will yield. Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Representative Nelson. And you probably heard the questions that I just asked to Representative Murphy, and I'm wondering if this is a request that the unions have asked you as a sort of a thank you to labor, if this is something that they asked you to bring forward in this pension bill.
Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Representative Pepin and membership. This is not a thank you to anybody. This is a way for our retired employees from the state of Minnesota to be able to get information that is needed about their pension, about the other things. The union or who's ever doing this mailing, they pay the full cost of the mailing. They deliver the mailing to the pension board or to a mail house, and the addresses are put on, and it's at no cost to the state of Minnesota because the union is the one that's paying the full cost of this, and it's just a way for them to communicate with these people that were members of their locals, and the pension board has their right addresses. Once they stop work here, they may not be members anymore, so the union doesn't have the addresses, and this is a way to get information about their pensions and about other things to them that these members, our former employees, have asked for. And so this is what it is. There's no cost to the state. It's just a way for them to get information to these members.
Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If Representative Nelson would continue to yield.
He will yield. Representative Pepin.
Representative Nelson, I'm not quite, to me this looks, since it was May, and I think Representative Murphy established that this was done in the past, but before it was May, and now it's saying they shall be required to do this. How would this be any different than if we were to put in our statute that they shall be required to deduct our mortgage payments or our gym deductions? We're requiring them to do this, and I think it's highly inappropriate as the state retirement plan that they should do this, and I'm wondering how you justify this and if you think it would be appropriate to require them to do other deductions as well.
Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. The shall is if the person collecting the pension requests that these dues, these payments be deducted, then they shall do it if it's requested. But if it's not requested, they don't have to do it. And again, this was at the request of the pension plans that asked for this language.
Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative Nelson. That's not exactly the conversation I remember during the committee hearing. But the point that I think you're trying to confuse is, yes, the retiree has the option, and it's optional for them whether they do it or not. But the part that's the mandate is the part that says shall, that's on the retirement plans. If the retiree asks for it, then the pension plans shall deduct. And so that is a mandate on them. And then I'll move on from that, Representative Nelson, and I want to get back to the other part that you talked about, the part that's on the last part of the page, where you pointed out it's no cost. It's going to cost nothing for the retirement system because the labor organizations are going to pay to use these lists. But Representative Nelson, would it be appropriate then if I were to send some political mail out and to add maybe a different party or some other group or maybe even a small business to send them require that the retirement system allow us to use the list as well? Would that be appropriate? And if not, why not? If you'd yield.
Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. These are people that have a current relationship with the pension plan and have had a relationship in the past with the organizations that are asking for this information to go out to them. This is information that our retirees have asked for and want. And again, it's no cost to the pension plans because the organization that is asking to have the mailing go out is paying the full cost of the mailing. And so it's just getting information that the pensioners want and the pensioners have requested, and the list is kept by the pension commission or the pension plans. And so instead of giving the list to the person that wants the mailing out, they give the mailing to the pension plans, and the pension plans just affix the labels on them, and they get sent out. And the cost is borne by the people that are sending these out.
Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Nelson, the problem I have with that is that we're essentially asking the retirement plans to use their lists to do the bidding of the unions. We're asking them to be able to, that'd be great. That'd be like, Representative Nelson, when you run for office, you probably get a list from your party. I know I do. It would, even though the union is paying for it, just the fact that they have that list is a huge value. I'm sure a lot of small businesses or political parties would like to also force the retirement system to be able to use their list to be able to send the mailings out. Maybe Vanguard would like that so they can consider, different retirement plans. If you could look, Representative Nelson, if you'd yield to the bottom, it says the retirement system shall have no obligation to approve or disapprove. I'm not sure if you could enlighten me what no obligation. Does that mean they have the ability to turn it down and say, nope, we're not going to mail this because it's inappropriate? Or does this mean that they have to mail it? It should probably say whether or not they have the ability, but it just says no obligation. What is your intent on that? Because I think we need to establish that today. Is your intent that they're forced to send whatever the unions want to send, or do they have the ability to turn it down if they think that the mailing's inappropriate?
Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, this is not just the unions, it's all organizations that have had dealings in the past with these employees, and they're sending the information out to these employees. They're paying the full cost of this, and it's their information going out. The only thing that touches the pension plans is that the list of the pensioners will be used, but that's kept in the pension plans. It's not given to the organization that's sending this stuff out, and it's no cost to the pension plans, and it's the information that the pensioners have requested.
Representative Pepin.
Mr. Speaker, if Representative Nelson would continue to yield.
He will yield. Representative Pepin.
Representative Nelson, I would like a more clear answer, because I would like to know, and I'd like to make sure we understand your intent of the words no obligation. Does the pension plan have the ability to say, no, this mailing is not appropriate? I understand we're very clear on who's paying for it. I understand the labor organization is paying for it. But I want to know if the retirement plan has the ability to look at it and say, no, this is not, the content is not appropriate for this mailing, because the language says she'll have no obligation. So I'd like to get, since we don't have the ability to amend it here, I'd like to get on tape whether, yes, they do have the ability to regulate the content and say, no, this isn't appropriate, or if they don't. So I just want to know, do they or don't they have the ability to turn the mailing down if they think it's inappropriate?
Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. And if you look up on the bill, on line 212.26, such mailing shall not be for the purpose of supporting opposing candidates, political party, ballot measures. So we're already telling them what they can't put in it. So there is some oversight. We are putting it in there by putting it in the statute.
Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Nelson, I wish you would just answer the question, because I think it's really important going forward whether or not they have the ability to turn down the content of a mailing if they think it's appropriate. I understand it lays out a few things. I think that there's going to be some black or white questions, and so I would like to know on tape going forward, will they have any ability to disapprove of and not mail if they don't believe, if the retirement plan doesn't believe the content is appropriate? I just want to know, will they have any ability to do that, or will they not? There's no obligation. It's ambiguous, and just want to know what your intent is on that.
Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker and members, I believe I've answered the question. I don't know how better I can say it, and maybe we're having a failure to communicate here, but I believe I've answered the question. It's in the language of the bill, members, and so I don't know what else I could say to dissuade or convince Representative Pepin of my intent.
Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Well, Representative Nelson, I'm really disappointed that I've given you 3 opportunities to answer the question, and I think it's very important, because there could come a time when there could be a request on the union to send something out that is highly inappropriate, and if the retirement plan doesn't have the ability to veto that, that's very discouraging. Because what we're doing here is we're making our retirement plans agents of the union. And Representative Nelson, I saw your interview on WCCO the other day when you talked about the forced unionization of small business owners who don't want to be unionized. When you were asked why we're doing that. And I think the reporter asked you the question of, is this payback to the labor organizations for the campaign season? And you said there is some of that. There is some thank you to labor. And this is really frustrating because not only are we doing that later, Representative Nelson, but we're doing this now. And I think it couldn't be crystal clear. There's all sorts of problems with this bill, and this section kind of gets tucked in the back. But we're requiring our state pension plans to do the bidding of the union. We're requiring them to deduct union dues. We're requiring them to use their list so that the unions can send out propaganda to retirees. But we're not giving that same opportunity to anybody else. We're not forcing the retirement system to make other deductions. We're not forcing the retirement systems to allow other political or other business organizations to send out the same type of mailings. This could not be clearer to me. This is crystal clear. This looks like union payback to me. It looks like we're forcing our state retirement system to do the bidding of the unions, and that, members, regardless of how you feel about the labor unions, this is just the first. We're going to hear more of this. We'll spend a day or so on the forced unionization of small business owners who don't want to be unionized later on today. But this is just the pecking away, and it's very discouraging. So there's a lot of reasons, members, not to vote for this bill, and other members have very eloquently explained why. But I didn't want people to see this bill and vote on this bill without at least having the opportunity to review Article 15 and review what kind of precedent we're sending here. Members, I'd ask you to vote no on this bill.
Member from Dakota, Representative Atkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as you can perhaps tell from the shirt that I wore today, Mr. Speaker, I was going to try to remain in my chair. I think you've had enough of Atkins all session long, and I suspect, yes, go ahead and applaud that. But I didn't come for this fight. I was invited into it. When Representative Kelly asked me the question, started talking about the need for defined contribution plans rather than pension plans for our cops and our firefighters, and when Representative Albright and Representative Benson questioned whether or not we should do the same, whether we ought to have defined contribution rather than defined pensions for our cops and our firefighters, I started thinking about that. And first off, there needs to be a little bit of clarity brought to this issue. Number one is pensions work. They work in Minnesota where we've got only 1.6%. Let's just use facts. 1.6% of our funds go to pensions. The average across the country is 2.9%. Pensions work. So thank you, Representative Murphy, for your work on this bill. This is a good bill. And when there's a problem, cops and firefighters step up to solve it. They've taken $1 billion in cuts over the last 3 years towards their pensions. That's 15%. And they've contributed 12% more. So when there's a problem, they've stepped up. And what do we do when there's a problem? What I'm picking up from the other side right now is rather than do what cops and firefighters do when there's a problem and run into the building or go into that dark basement, we run away. We talk the nice talk about what we're willing to do for our cops and our firefighters and how much we respect them. But every day they wake up and their whole life is a risk. And they're willing to take that risk for the people that they protect and for the people that they work for here in this room. And when there's a problem, they run towards it. And where do we go? We run away. At least that's what I'm hearing from the other side. We're going to run away. Rather than stick with these folks whose entire lives are at risk. Every morning they wake up, their life is at risk. And hopefully it won't be that day. But they understand that that's part of the job that they do. And instead of saying, you know what, this is the one thing we're not going to put at risk. We're going to actually guarantee in your life that you're going to have a solid pension at the end. That's one thing you won't have to worry about. We're saying, nope, we're we're going to run away. That's what I'm hearing from the other side. And I'm hearing vote no, vote red. Folks, give me a break. This is one time when your words matter. Your actions matter. Have the actions match the words. Step up. Don't just say you're here for cops and firefighters. Actually do it. Vote green. This is a great bill. And it protects those folks who protect us, who are willing to take that risk every day. Show them that your actions match your words and vote green on this bill. Stand with our cops and stand with our firefighters and do the right thing. Vote green.
Representative Leidiger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, what we're hearing, I think, was more of a sales pitch for protectionism, because that's what this is all about. It's protectionism. It's once again creating slowly this protected class of citizens. You know, instead of tackling the real problem, the real hard problem, which is, of course, having government employees really look and do what has been going on in the private sector for years, which is moving towards defined contribution type plans, 401ks, and the like. But instead what we're hearing from over there, and I wasn't going to speak on this, but the more and more and more I hear this, it's this protectionism. It's this creation of, special things for government employees and benefits and retirement packages and pay increases and things like that. And I've already stated I don't have a problem with people making good money. What I really have a problem with is this expansion in numbers within the government system and almost unending benefits when the people that are paying for that in the private sector are not getting anything like that. They're the ones that are paying for this protected system. Because, and what do I mean when I say protected system? The protectionism. I mean, it can't be touched. Government employees, they're not floating with the economy and what's going on out there. But those people that are paying for this, that are in the private economy, they have to float and rely on the ups and downs of the economy. They take the pay cuts. They take the pay increases. They live and breathe it. But government is protected. Government employees is protected. And the problem I have with this is, if we would consistently concentrate on reducing this and at least this protectionism, and have them do defined contribution type plans, paying for performance, get the system more like what happens in the private sector. That sector which is paying for this entire governmental infrastructure. And that's what I have a problem with. Representative Kelly's talked about, Representative Pepin is right on. And we got to wake up, because if we don't, it's unsustainable. And that's my message. Thank you.
Representative Khan.
Mr. Speaker and members, it's been very interesting listening to all these possible proposals. I actually was probably the person who carried the last defined contribution bill which at the behest of the groups, that was the IRAP bill from the Minshew system, who actually wanted it, and they wanted it as a choice because it fit in with the projected mobility of those faculty members. So to Representative Leidinger, to Representative Kelly, to Representative Albright, if you really think a defined contribution plan is a good idea, put in the bill. We haven't had a bill since that time. And so just put in the bill, work out the finances, talk with the people who are going to receive it, get the support, or just put it in the bill and put it in and say we'll just stick it to people and give it to them. But let's see the bill instead of just hearing the talk about how we should have done it.
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members. Representative Khan, I look forward to working with that bill with you. Representative Atkins, I appreciate the shout out to all our firefighters and policemen out there. My three brothers in law enforcement who have 45 years on the job appreciate that. But you talk about them running into risk, and that's what they do every day. I would suggest what we are doing is absolutely running away from the problem. Our suggestion is, and the way we solve problems apparently, is just throw more money at it and pretend that it's going to go away. If you want to talk about risk, look at the years 2000 to 2003. Look at the years 2008. We are playing with their livelihood and their pension. So when I talk about reducing risk and doing the right job, I'm not suggesting that we don't have an investment to make. If we went to a defined contribution, that would be a major investment that we would have to protect, and we would have to move into that plan. But that's going to be a tough decision. It's going to be a tough talk. It's going to be a great bill, Representative Khan. And I will plan on moving that forward. But Representative Atkins, to suggest that we don't support our firefighters and policemen is completely inappropriate. This is what we need to do. I don't understand why someone who goes to work at 3M or Excel or IBM or, God forbid, as a legislator should work on a defined contribution plan, and we should suggest that public employees should somehow be treated differently. We need to protect them. And that's what I'm suggesting that defined contributions would be, and I will gladly work on that.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I appreciate the discussion that we've had today on an issue that I think everyone is in agreement on, and that there's just different approaches to how we're going to move forward with this. First of all, I'd like to also say thank you to Representative John Benson is on the floor, but I know he's a retired school teacher. I'd like to thank him for his service. And Representative Swatsky is also a school teacher. I see she's not on the floor, but I'd like to thank her as well. Representative Marquardt is currently a teacher and is on the floor. I'd like to thank you, Representative Marquardt, for your service. And I don't know the backgrounds of everybody on the DFL side, but I know a number of you. Representative Schoen, currently in law enforcement, thank you. Members on our side, Representative Erickson, a retired school teacher. Representative Cornish, Representative Johnson, and others. This is clearly, Representative Detmer, this is clearly a bipartisan supported activity. Pensions and retirements. It's how we go about doing this. It's been suggested in my time on the Pension Commission that we move forward with, boy, if we just had more people coming in the front door, that would help with the benefits of retirees. That's a system that Social Security has used in some respects, and it hasn't been successful. I fully understand and respect the fact that everyone who wants to have a pension or have a comfortable retirement would love to shift that risk from themselves to some other source. And that other source right now, ladies and gentlemen, is the State Investment Board, which is charged with trying to get an average annual yield of 8% in a market that does not come close to 8% over the last 4 to 5 years, nor does it look like it's going to be in the next few years. Yes, our markets are at record returns, but that's not enough to move the needle on what we're doing right now for pensions. I, again, do not come to this issue lightly. Both of my parents were PERA covered employees in government service. My father was a member of PERA's Police and Fire. For almost 30 years, he was the police chief in the city of Sartell. And I can tell you, Representative Atkins, I know firsthand about the dangers that law enforcement officials face. It was Super Bowl Sunday, January 1991. I had just dropped off my girlfriend at that point and was heading back to my apartment to meet my brother and get ready for the next day. When I approached my apartment building, there were several police officers, emergency responders, and ambulances at the perimeter of the apartment complex. I went in and my brother said, "How did you get in? There's been shots fired." And there's more shots fired. And there's damage, and there's more police officers, and there's more sirens that are coming, Representative Atkins. Well, interestingly enough, I had pulled by the police station, and I thought, that's kind of odd that my dad's truck was at the police station at 10 o'clock at night. Only upon entering the apartment to meet my brother did I find out that my dad had been called as the chief law enforcement officer in Sartell to be the incident commander for that. It's not the first time that my father has been involved in a situation like that, where an individual has barricaded themselves into a home, an apartment, or a building, where my father said, "We're going to go in, but we're not going to go in guns a-blazing. I'm going to walk in. I'm going to talk to this individual, man to man, person to person." Deputies from several law enforcement agencies, including the officers from neighboring law enforcement agencies, accompanied him, stood back from him, guns drawn to cover his back, while he was serving the people of the city of Sartell in the state of Minnesota. He knocked at the door. The gunman opened the door. He had a shotgun. One of the officers flinched, and moments later my father had a shotgun in his chest, unarmed. I'm 26 years old. I nearly lost my father that day. It wasn't until days after that incident that I learned the details. But sitting in my apartment window, watching this go on the phone with my mother and other brother who were at home, listening to the police scanner, I have full respect for the members of law enforcement and firefighting. As a matter of fact, my youngest brother has chosen a career in firefighting. He is now a captain and paramedic for the Hillsborough County Fire Department in Florida, highly decorated for his service. Part of the reason why I serve in public service the way that I do is because of the dedication of my father, the values I learned from him. So if we're saying that folks on this side of the aisle, they just don't get it, we get it, I get it. I asked to be on the Pension Commission to be able to help to preserve benefits for the school teachers, for the police officers, for the firefighters. What I know from my line of work, which is the same line of work that Representative Albright, Representative Kelly are in, the financial services industry. We have to be able to keep our promises. And right now, it's a difficult task to keep those promises. We're going to be infusing nearly $30 million in this budget to the police and fire, to volunteer, to MSRS for the State Patrol, for the school programs for Duluth and in St. Paul. All very worthy people, all promises we made, all obligations we have to keep. One of the other things that I think is a little difficult for us right now is in the number of bills that we have. We're bringing on well over 1,000 FTEs. New folks who may be starting their careers or transferring within their professions. And we're going to be continuing to make those folks these very same promises that we're having trouble keeping right now. All we have asked is to have the opportunity to sit down and have an honest discussion about how we could look at viable alternatives, and we can't get that. Maybe we will be proven wrong, maybe we will be proven right, maybe the middle ground is somewhere, but we can't get there because we cannot get included provisions to be able to have that conversation and discussion. Members, I wish this bill went further. It does not go far enough, because 12 months from now when we stand on this House floor having a similar conversation about needing to do something, let's hurry up and get home. Let's get done. The clock is ticking. We once again, I fear, will close a blind eye to this matter. And it's not fair. It's not fair to those hardworking public employees nor the taxpayers of the state of Minnesota. I was not going to be as impassioned as I am now, but the conversation that has happened on this floor, pointing the finger at the Republicans and saying, you don't care, you don't get it, I think is disingenuous. Members, it's with a heavy heart that I suggest that we vote no and do the real work that needs to be done, and not just nibbling around the edges and treating the symptoms. We need to go to the source of where the problem is. We need to address this, just like we need to address many other issues. Members, please vote no.
To the author of the bill, Representative Murphy.
Thank you, members. Senate File 489, the Omnibus Pension Bill, is responsible, promotes solvency and stability, and leads us toward keeping our promises. The discussion today on the floor of this House is valued. We appreciate the suggestions that have been made. I have listened, as I always try to do. I will continue to do so, and I will continue to reach out to all people that are affected by Senate File 489, by groups, as well as recipients of our efforts. We do listen, and we ask them to listen too. And they have, as has been suggested on the floor. We have over $500 million of savings in this bill. Through increased contributions, benefit cuts, individuals, recipients, and future recipients working together to say, we want to strengthen the plans that we are going to be beneficiaries of, or that we are beneficiaries of. We had a job in Minnesota Service. We were valued, and the people that are working and serving us today are valued too. Our public employees are counting on us, the legislature. We are the ones that determine what the laws are by which their future will be bound. As Representative Atkins mentioned, Minnesota spends 1.6% of all state and local government expenditure on pensions. In state government, I wonder How many people know pensions? Lots of people say, oh, too complicated for me. And you saw today when I was questioned, some of those questions were too complicated for me. But every single day, I learned something new about the pensions. Later on, not soon, we're going to have the state government bill, which I'm also working on before you. And you know how it is when commissioners and assistant commissioners come at the beginning of session, I gotta talk to you, and then they list what they need to happen in your committees for their agencies that the public employees are working for. I have never, ever heard a commissioner or deputy commissioner say, yes, and we need money for the pensions. It's just kind of taken for granted that someone is looking out for the pensions of the public employees. I am so thankful to our leadership that when I said at the beginning of the session, I am working for a target for pensions. Because we have to address some of the instability and solvency problems in all of our pension plans that we are the directors of. We don't always have someone saying, this is in the targets. And in the years that I've been here, there haven't been a whole lot of governors that have said pension solvency should be part of our targets. And that's part of our problems that you've talked about today. And Representative Albright was right on. This is a growing American problem. Totally into how our pensions paid for. And we have to improve state government so that it's a recognizable ask at the beginning of a process rather than at the end. But we have worked. The Pension Commission has worked to develop a bill that is responsible and takes big steps, not giant, for solvency and stability and keeping our promises, Representative O'Driscoll. It is a bill that we can smile when we vote green. It's a bill that can tell your school teachers and your police officers and your city clerk and your township employees and the snowplow driver, This is a step to say thank you for a good job.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. Clerk will close the roll. Fisher votes aye. There being 78 ayes and 53 nays, the bill is repassed as amended by conference and its title agreed to. Report from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration.
Report from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration. Murphy E. for the Committee on Rules, pursuant to Rule 121, designates the following bill to be placed on the supplemental count for today for Saturday, May 18, 2013. House File Number 972.
Calendar for the day. The first bill on the calendar for the day is House File 1214. Clerk will report the bill.
House File 1214 on the calendar for the day, the second engrossment, an act relating to commerce.
So the author of the bill, the member from Ramsey, Representative Mahoney.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After a nice long debate there, how about a little humor? You know, we like to try and talk about peace in the valley. I think on this particular one, we just have peacekeepers. My seatmate told me not to tell that joke. Members, I'd like to thank the people. This is not a new bill. This was here last year, and it has fallen into my lap to kind of bring it, hopefully bring it home. I wanted to thank Carol McFarland. She's in the back there. This is an important bill for her. We couldn't quite carry it across the finish line last year, so we're going to try and do it this year. There were many members. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Representative Mahoney.
There's an amendment at the desk?
Yes, there's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Mahoney moving to amend House File 1214, the second engrossment as follows. The amendment is coded A1.
Representative Mahoney.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This amendment, the A1 amendment, is superseded provisions. There are some provisions in law and in some of the other bills that are moving forward. The department likes the language in this particular bill, and in case this one gets signed first and the next one coming after it was to get signed, the one signed last supersedes. This amendment allows for this particular bill, 1214, to supersede anything coming after it in this session. So quickly, I'll give you some background on this. This is the scrap metal bill. Oh wait, we should vote on this.
Further discussion to the amendment. Further discussion. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. Representative Mahoney.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A little background on this particular, on the scrap metal bill. You're getting a set of letters handed out. These are all the people who have been involved in the negotiations. It was a bit contentious because you tried to bring in the scrap metal dealers, the auto scrappers, and the auto parts scrappers, and brought them to the table. We have been having problems with, well, in my district, we have a refrigerated rink that had $20,000 or $25,000 worth of copper stolen. And kids couldn't play their hockey games for an extra month to 6 weeks until one of the local contractors stepped up and repaired the rink. Many people, what's been happening is cars, particularly older cars, were getting hooked up to tow trucks and towed directly to scrappers. And because of the way the laws are structured, they were getting crushed or crunched right away. And those cars were being stolen as they were being brought in. Farmers were having their irrigation systems stolen out of their fields. So this bill is an attempt to put some regulations onto it. And it brought together, as I said, the scrapyard dealers, the auto scrappers, the people who scrap out cars for parts. And they've all spent all session kind of working this particular bill out. There were some areas of concern. Many of you have talked to me about them. One of the big concerns was the 10-day hold. There was a 10 or 15-day hold period. That is gone for the scrappers, the auto scrappers. The people who buy autos for parts wanted a 7-day hold, and that is in here. Those that buy scrap metal and let it sit till they get enough to sell it off to the next spot had no problems and would have preferred the 7 days. There was a concern about having to verify ownership. Who's got all the titles? What about a car that's been sitting in the back 40 for 10 years? They've dealt with this by your ability. You will have the ability to go to a DVS website and verify that it has not been registered in X number of years, and that will serve as not as a title, but give a waiver to not having a title. Then on something even older than that, like an immobile car, all you have to do is describe it. I mean, it cannot be running, you can't find the VIN number. You just tow it to the scrap yard. They write out a reasonable description, a 1955 Pontiac, rusty blue, license plate if it's there. And submit that. There were concerns about what is called the APS system, or the automated property system, I think it's called. Yeah, automated property system. And that has been worked out with the City of Minneapolis. Has an automated pawn system that they run for all of Minnesota and most of western Wisconsin. They will be developing software, so it will be used in the same fashion here, and they will run it. The goal here is efficiency for the dealers and trackability for police when they're trying to track down stolen property, which is really important if your car is stolen or they steal the copper from your ice rink in your neighborhood. It was a refrigerated rink. The bill also is crafted to force these same people that you just got a letter of supports from, and I think there's about 10 organizations, to force them to continue to talk. We want them to set the fee. We don't want them to make a dime more than what this system is going to cost, or charge, I should say, a dime more than what the system is going to cost. We want the system to work with whatever computer system they have, and it's in the language for commercial products. So they will continue to talk, iron out a few of the last details, figure out the fee and the cost, and then bring it back to us for next session. And then they will implement it in January of 2015. Members, I will stand for questions.
Member from Carver, Representative Hoppe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the author yield to a question?
He will yield. Representative Hoppe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Mahoney, thank you for working on this bill. I think it's a good bill. I do have one clarification. I spoke to you about this the other day. When we were talking about the APS system, the automated property system, just reassure the members of the body, if you would, that this isn't going to start until 2015 or 2014, excuse me, but in the interim, you and the stakeholders are going to work on this, figure out what the fee schedule is. That's the schedule of fees that pays for the system, and that it won't start until the legislature, get that figured out, and the funding comes through here, and then the system will get up and running. If you could do that, I would greatly appreciate it.
Representative Mahoney.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative Hoppe. That is absolutely correct. We are going to see this bill again next year, and we will be going to all the committees that we went to this year, Judiciary. I don't think we made it to Civil Law, but at that time we will, because there are some concerns about how this data is used. And then it'll come to Commerce again, and then it'll come to the floor again.
Representative Hoppe.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Mahoney. I think it's fair to say, members, this is not a great bill, but it's a work in progress. I think Representative Mahoney would echo that thought. I think it is the right direction. Groups are going to work in the interim, try to get this fined out. Not everybody's happy. I don't think we have the mythical peace in the valley, but everybody's just a little unhappy with it, which is probably a good sign. So I appreciate your work on this, Representative Mahoney, and I would encourage members to vote yes.
Member from Roseau, Representative Fabian.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Representative Mahoney, thank you for the bill, I guess. I have some concerns. I've handed out a letter. I appreciate the fact that this bill has been worked on through the legislative process. I've spent a fair amount of time with Representative Zerwas. You can see the concerns that we have in my part of the state. I've talked about northwest Minnesota. We've got some good, hard-working, honest, law-abiding citizens, as you can see by the letter that's in front of you from the Chief of Police in Thief River Falls and our Pennington County Sheriff. I do have some concerns with the bill in that, members, we are going to do a study. We're creating a working group that's going to come with some recommendations, but the concerns that I have is that if the working group, as I understand it, cannot come to an agreement, some of the prescriptive things that are in the bill will take effect on January 1st, 2015. So I just want some clarification. If the author would stand for a question, please, if he would yield.
He will yield. Representative Fabian.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Mahoney, is that correct that if you do not come to some sort of an agreement through the process in the next year, you said we're going to hear this bill next year, that there are some changes that are going to take place no matter what happens beginning January 1st of 2015. Is that correct?
Representative Mahoney.
Mr. Speaker and Representative Fabian, I suspect there could be a couple pieces that would go forward, but if there's no fee, then you can't disperse the APS system, so the APS system wouldn't be available and not much else would play throughout this whole bill.
Representative Fabian.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Mahoney, I would just ask that through the process you keep the letters that I've circulated given to you. Please keep in mind the considerations that we have, or the concerns that we have in my part of the state with the people that I represent. Members, we don't have a problem. It's pretty obvious in my part of the state we don't have a problem with this. Could there be a problem in the future? Absolutely. If you read through the letter from the scrap metal dealer that has sent this, you can see that they already are fairly labor intense. They do have a lot of security issues in their facility. They do have cameras. They cannot pay in cash. And they are concerned about the well-being of their business. They employ 9 to 10 people other than the owners. So I would just ask that we keep in mind that we've got a lot of small business owners out there who are working hard every day to make a living and provide jobs for the hard-working taxpayers of the state of Minnesota. Let's not go overboard, members. I'm voting red on this bill today. Thank you.
Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A point of parliamentary inquiry.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just wondering, I know we've got just a little over 48 hours to pass a balanced budget here for the state of Minnesota. Wondering if there are conference committee reports. I know that's what we're waiting for. Are there any budget bills waiting at the desk in the House's possession that we can take up?
Representative Dowd.
Mr. Speaker.
Representative Murphy.
Mr. Speaker and members.
For what point? For what purpose do you ask?
I would be happy to answer the question, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative Dowd. The Environment and Ag Conference Committee report is signed or is being signed and will be ready for our work shortly. And the Education bill, the Education Conference Committee bill is imminent. We understand within the next 30 to 60 minutes it will be ready for us. And the Senate just delivered the Transportation Policy Omnibus bill. So there is work to be done. We just received the message from the Senate, so we're going to finish up this bill, do the joint resolution, take a break so you have some time to caucus, the Ag and Environment bill, and then we'll be back.
Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Zerwas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Mahoney, for your work on this. I started working on this issue shortly after I was elected, when the sheriff of Sherburne County and the county attorney from Sherburne County contacted me with issues regarding scrap metal theft and metal theft in our prospective county. In the 5 years I served on the Anoka County Sheriff's Office in the crime lab, this was also a significant issue that we dealt with when the foreclosure crisis first hit. We had several houses that were abandoned that ended up being stripped out, causing significant loss back to banks and, in some cases, potential buyers when they return to the property. I just want to talk a little bit about the process and the changes here. It's important, members, to realize that a lot of what this is doing and accomplishing is already required under Minnesota state statute. A lot of that information, the identifying information, the descriptions, those records are already required to be retained. What this is doing is putting it into a proven computer system that will allow law enforcement to more easily and readily search from a centralized location. It improves efficiency in government. One of the handouts provided by the Minneapolis Police Department talks about the current automated pawn system that recovers on average $100,000 in stolen property per month. So clearly this is a system that's proven itself. We have letters of support from the Minnesota Irrigators Association, the Scrap Metal Association, the Minnesota Sheriff's Association, the Minnesota Police Chiefs Association, and the Minnesota County Attorneys Association. If I was channeling Representative Atkins, I'd say this is being done in 54 states. Vote for it. You'll lose weight. You'll feel better about yourself. This, sorry, Joe. But I think this is, it's not the best compromise. I think it's one of those situations where if everyone feels like they didn't fully get their way, we're definitely making progress. And the fee schedule is something that we'll be working on. It is important to point out that the way the statute is drafted for the fee schedule for this is a little bit different than the current automated pawn system, which allows cities to set an additional license fee lumped on top of the APS fee for licensing pawn shops. This will lock in a fee that the legislature will agree to and will not, by the way this statute is written, allow local units of government to have that fee be higher. And so I think that's really important to understand as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I urge a green vote.
There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File 1214 as amended.
Third reading. Member from Blue Earth, Representative Cornish.
Mr. Speaker and members, I'll kind of mirror Representative Zerwas' comments to a certain extent. Representative Mahoney, I wanted to thank you for your work on this. I know you came to it after several years of bickering back and forth between the two parties who seem to come a kind of an agreement. But I would caution you in the future deals when this, we know it's going to come back at us. And I'd much rather see it kind of level off now and see how these fixes work for a while. And I know the scrappers, I've got some in my area, the only reason they really approved this is because they were afraid it might turn into something worse, and they were kind of drug into it. But they do agree, just in the hopes that nothing worse will happen. So in the future years, I hope it kind of levels off and we just go very slowly for the scrappers' sake. So thank you, Representative Mahoney.
Further discussion? Further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Clerk will close the roll. There being 103 ayes and 27 nays, the bill is passed as amended, and its title agreed to. Messages from the Senate.
Message from the Senate. Mr. Speaker, I hereby announce the adoption by the Senate of the following Senate concurrent resolution herewith transmitted. Senate concurrent resolution number 7, a Senate concurrent resolution relating to adjournment of the Senate and the House of Representatives until 2014. Signed, Joanne M. Zoff, Secretary of the Senate. Introduction of Senate concurrent resolution number 7 relating to adjournment of the Senate and House of Representatives until 2014. Murphy E. moves that the rules be so far suspended that Senate concurrent resolution number 7 be now placed upon its adoption.
To the Majority Leader, Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I would move a suspension of the rules so we can adopt the resolution number 7, which will set the date and time for when we reconvene in 2014. And I would ask for your vote.
Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the Majority Leader yield for a question?
She will yield. Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Murphy, can you just tell me how many week session this would give us next session? If you have that information, I apologize about putting you on the spot.
Representative Murphy.
Was it 13 weeks?
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Dowd, 13 weeks.
Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would support the motion to suspend the rules to take up this resolution.
Any further discussion on suspension of the rules? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The motion prevails.
Murphy E. moves that Senate concurrent resolution number 7 be now adopted.
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I would ask for your vote for Senate concurrent resolution number 7, which sets the date and time of our next meeting, or when we reconvene for February 25th, 2014.
Further discussion. Representative
Dowd. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would speak in support of the resolution.
Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The resolution is adopted. Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a point of personal privilege.
State your point of personal privilege.
Mr. Speaker and members, it was just over a year ago, on May 3rd, 2012, here in the House of Representatives, you honored a man that I knew well on his 85th birthday for 55 years on the Stearns County Soil and Water Conservation District Board. It was Jerry Bechtold Day. Jerry Bechtold was first elected as a Soil and Water Conservation District Supervisor in 1957. The environmental issues that faced Stearns County back then were a lot different than they were today, but one thing Jerry did very well is he changed with the times. Bechtold is the longest serving supervisor on a soil and water conservation district board in the state of Minnesota. National records aren't available. It's believed that he holds the record for the longest serving elected public official as 56 years. Jerry Bechtold served not only on the Soil and Water Conservation Board, he was also my township supervisor, and he also served on the city's planning board while I was served as it's getting tough, on the city council. Jerry Bechtold died on Thursday. He's going to be truly missed in our city, our county, and the state of Minnesota. Members, I ask for a moment of silence in honor of Jerry Bechtold.
Members, please stand for a moment of silence. Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. In a moment, I'll call a recess to the call of the chair. I would anticipate that we'll be out for about an hour, maybe a little bit more. DFL members, we're going to caucus in room 217. And when we come back, we'll take up the energy or the environment and ag bill. And soon after that, I hope the K-12 bill. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I move a recess to the call of the chair.
Representative Murphy moves a recess to the call of the chair. Discussion. Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Murphy yield for a question?
She will yield. Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Murphy, can you give us an idea of what else might be coming this evening? I know we have a number of in-home daycare providers who are concerned about a bill that potentially could force them to be unionized. Will that bill be coming up this evening? And if so, maybe at what time?
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative Dowd. I would anticipate we'll take up the budget bills, both the environment and ag and education. We also have the transportation policy omnibus bill. We are also going to take up the piece of legislation that would allow child care providers and health care providers the right to vote for representation if that was their choice. We'll take that up yet today as well. I'm not certain of the order or the time, but our priority, of course, is for the budget bills that are coming before us.
Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Murphy. And GOP members will caucus in our caucus room immediately following the recess.
Representative McNamara.
Mr. Speaker, I'm wondering if the Majority Leader would yield for a question.
She will yield. Representative McNamara.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Majority Leader Murphy, I understand, I believe I just saw the conference committee report being signed for environment. You mentioned we're going to come back and take it up. Do you know when it will be posted? We have not seen that bill. It was not presented in conference committee last night. I was told you were going to come back into conference and adopt it. Evidently, they're doing it without coming back into conference. Do you know when we're going to be able to see the bill before it's debated?
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative McNamara. I anticipate that it will be posted at any moment now. I've been talking back and forth with Minority Leader Dowd about this to make sure that there was time for your caucus to take up the issue and talk about it before we take it up here. So I would anticipate it will be posted. I want it to be posted before we take it up and make sure that you have some time to look at it.
Representative McNamara.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Majority Leader Murphy, we should just be sure. There was an amendment adopted at the end of conference committee, Mr. Speaker and Majority Leader, that was not available. It has not been seen. It was not properly explained, and it was adopted at 12:59 last night. It was my understanding this committee was coming back in to meet, and that amendment would be properly adopted. It was never presented, and so we don't know what's in this bill. You just said now we're going to take it up. I see it being signed on the floor just a minute ago. No one has seen this bill. It's never been posted, and you're talking about having a recess and coming back and taking it up. I just would hope that we will at least get to see the bill, Mr. Speaker and Majority Leader. We have not seen the bill. It's never been presented in conference committee. None of the public has seen this yet. Thank you.
Representative Murphy's motion is that the House recess to the call of the chair. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The motion prevails. The House stands in recess.